listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
If you're in love, happy Valentine's Day. If you're not in love, well, better luck next time. If you're Chinese, Kung Hei Fa Choi, Happy New Year. If you're Chinese and you're in love, what are you doing watching this show? You are going to have a good night. But for everyone else, we're very glad that you're joining us tonight because with one bound, he was free. Well as you can bound with the bone spurs problem and all of that. Donald Trump has walked free from the second impeachment trial over the last 4 years. He has been impeached more times than anyone else, but he's been cleared by the court of the Senate more than anyone else. Will he run again in 24? Or will he find someone with fresh legs, no bone spurs, in his own family to run on his behalf, with him as the kind of godfather? Did I say godfather? And we'll be talking about Boris Johnson, his alter ego here in London, who has done a good thing. He's announced a tunnel from Stranraer in southwest Scotland to Larne in northeast Ireland, bringing the two islands physically together for the very first time. I'm wholly in favour of it myself, for lots of reasons, which I shall adumbrate if anyone is interested. And I got the coronavirus jab. Not the Russian, not the Chinese. I got the Pfizer. I stiffened up immediately, if you get my drift. It's going to be rock and roll radio with pictures, so fasten your seatbelts. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway.
This is Radio Sputnik.
And this is London, but coming to you, of course, all over the world, thanks to the wonders of the internet and SputnikNews.com. If you're in Washington, D.C., as Donald Trump is no more, but might now yet be again, you can listen in crystal clarity on FM. 105.5 FM are the magic numbers there. Wherever you are, in, I don't know, Key Largo, in Florida, or anywhere from burning city to burning city, right across the United States, you can listen on AM. You can listen all over the world on the aforementioned SputnikNews.com. But if you are one of the more than 500,000 people who now every week watch as well as listen to the show, please listen to this. Mr. Algorithm is always active. And he's always trying to choke off our numbers. Last week on Facebook, we ended the show with 60,000 viewers. Within a couple of days, we were at 160,000 viewers. Go figure. How did that happen? Best way to avoid it happening is right now, if you're watching on Facebook, to share with all of your friends, all of your contacts on Facebook. You can watch, of course, on my own Facebook page. Do follow me there if you can. And you can watch on the Facebook pages of RT, the multitude, actually, of Facebook pages of RT. Ditto on YouTube. If you're watching on my YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe. But you can also watch on the YouTube channels of RT, a multitude of those. You can also watch on your phone, on Twitter, as a truly remarkable number of people are now doing. You can watch on Twitch. I think there may be others, my friends will tell me, but we are reaching more and more of the world through more and more platforms, because you never know when that algorithm is going to get nasty. Now, with one bound, as I said, a limp, really, Donald Trump walked free. It was a waste of taxpayers' dollars and the United States' time, especially when they have so many pressing problems to attend to. The economy is in free fall. The coronavirus pandemic murderously wiping out record numbers. You remember when they thought that 200,000 dead would be an outcome they could, if you'll forgive the pun, live with? Well, it is rampant in the United States. Still, until now, rampant. Joe Biden didn't fix it. After all, his mask idea hasn't yet begun to work. It may, of course, speaking as someone who wears a mask, I don't in any way want to discourage it. But the idea that everything in the United States would be rosy once the orange man was out of the White House is already, if you'll forgive another pun, looking pretty lame. The Democrats promised. In fact, they promised on the eve of poll in the crucial Georgia senatorial by-elections, vote for us and you'll get $2,000. Call it bribery if you like, but that's what they said. But they didn't actually mean it. They meant you'll get $1,400, and if you add the $600 you got 1 year ago from Donald Trump, well, that'll add up to $2,000. Even though it's only $1,400, it still has not been paid. And the United States has not rejoined the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. That's another pre-election promise, at least not fulfilled, if not broken yet. In fact, they've laid down a number of conditions which mean that it's exceedingly unlikely that the United States will be rejoining the Iran nuclear deal. So much for those that voted for Joe Biden, because that's the outcome that they wanted. The chance, therefore, of war between the United States and Iran continues to be considerable. Red alert if you are an Iranian. After all that firepower in the Persian Gulf, what's it there for? Joe Biden ain't going to recall the troops. In fact, he's doubling down, sending more troops to Iraq and cancelling the withdrawal of forces from places like Afghanistan. We'll be talking to literally the one and only Dr. Chris Hedges, the man that in any normal polity would be the Secretary of State running the foreign affairs of the United States. Instead, he's here talking to us on the mother of all talk shows. Lucky, lucky us. And we'll be talking about relationships. Well, it is St. Valentine's Day. I've actually seen the casket in which the bones of St. Valentine repose. I don't know if you know this, but the bones of St. Valentine himself repose in Glasgow. I can't remember the name of the church, but I went there to Frank McElhone's funeral, if someone can remind me, and the late Cardinal Tom Winning presiding. And before the funeral, I went and I saw the bones of St. Valentine's. He was actually martyred, bludgeoned to death. His head was cut off. I'm not sure how all that morphed into us sending each other flowers and chocolates. Not that I got either flowers or chocolates. I got absolutely nothing for Valentine's Day. Did you? You can let me know. I'll be talking to Joe Barnett, who's a relationship expert, a dating expert. So if you are in the dating game, you better listen to what she has to say. Did I tell you I got my vaccination? I got the Pfizer vaccination on Friday. I'm that old. And I got it thanks to the British Army in Scotland. In fact, all the soldiers were English. I almost wanted to apologize to them for the hideous, hateful rhetoric that they have to put up with in Scotland under the SNP, an unrelenting barrage, a real barrage of hate from Scottish nationalists on Twitter and who knows, maybe even on the street. The injection was absolutely flawlessly delivered. I literally did not feel it. And I've had no side effects, touch wood, no sore arm, no headache, no fever, and I'm already 3 days in. I will have to wait 12 weeks to get the second jab, but I'm looking forward to that. And I want to encourage everybody to get this vaccination. It will be better for you and better for all of us if we get the vaccination, unless there is an overwhelming reason, health or conscience or whatever, that precludes you getting it. You really ought to get it. Last week, I had to blow out of the water a lunatic who was not a Muslim, but who nonetheless advertently or inadvertently sought to sow confusion in the minds of Muslims by raising the implied possibility that there was pork in the coronavirus vaccine. This is a lie, or at the very least, a falsehood. It is false, whether he meant it deliberately or not. There is absolutely nothing haram, nothing forbidden to Muslims in the coronavirus vaccine. So don't let that kind of false propaganda, false information, maybe even disinformation, put you off from getting the vaccine. And I am the living proof that you can be back at your work immediately after getting it. It is ironic, though, that it was the British Army that gave it me. Given the SNP, if they had their way, there wouldn't be a British Army, or at least it wouldn't be in Scotland. In fact, the British Army has pulled the Scottish Nationalist government out of a very deep hole after the fiasco of the rollout of their vaccination. Feel free to let me know if I'm wrong, or indeed if you think I'm right. We'll be talking, of course, if you want to, about the Alex Salmond affair in the immediate aftermath of his failure to appear at the Committee of Inquiry. He failed to appear because the Committee of Inquiry had censored his evidence. You couldn't make it up. You go into a Committee of Inquiry, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but the committee won't allow you to tell the whole truth. As a matter of fact, they go to extraordinary lengths to make sure you can hardly tell any of the truth at all. So Alex Salmond did the right thing in refusing to go. The big question is, what does he do next? If you've got a point of view on that, let me know. And I told you, there's going to be a tunnel. It was going to be a bridge, but it was a bridge too far. Boris likes bridges, but it seems he's up for a tunnel. This tunnel from Stranraer, in my own area, south of Scotland, will tunnel under the Irish Sea and emerge in the northeast Irish port of Larne. A wonderful, wonderful idea. It'll cost £10 billion, which is a mere bagatelle compared to Eat Out to Help Out. Remember that? But the £10 billion will not be expenditure. Unlike the Eat Out to Eat Out to whatever it was, the slogan was, it will, in this case, actually pay back dividends for the rest of time. Eat Out to Help Out was spaffed against a wall within an hour or two of having been consumed. $10 billion for a tunnel that will link forever the mainland of Britain and Northern Ireland is a very good idea. It'll create lots of work, especially as the A75 will have to become a motorway, especially as the railway line between Dumfries and Stranraer will have to be souped up, reinstated first, and then souped up. It's fantastic news for Scotland. It's fantastic news for Scotland in Britain. And it's fantastic news for the people of Northern Ireland, indeed for the people of all Ireland. It's a win, win, win. And everybody should get behind it. Just because Boris Johnson came up with it, as a matter of fact, I proposed it long before he was even Prime Minister. But just because Boris Johnson's the man that's doing it, doesn't make it a bad idea. So stop being churlish, Nicola Sturgeon, and embrace it. By the way, it'll be a strategic British asset. It will be nothing to do with Holyrood. No one in their right mind would delegate to Holyrood a project of that strategic importance and size. After all, they can't even build a couple of ferries on the Clyde, which once built the Queen Elizabeth. So we'll be talking about all of these things. We'll be talking about the coronavirus, of course, with Moats' own medic, Dr. Ranjeet Brar, physician, surgeon, all-round, matinee idol, superstar that's taken us through all of this pandemic and will be with us right up until the end and indeed beyond the end because, well, there are other health issues that we'd love to talk about when we get the chance. Now, we've got a poll running, at least I hope it's running. Will Trump begin preparations for a 2024 presidential run? A, yes. B, no. C, will he send Ivanka instead? You can vote on my Twitter feed, which is at George Galloway, blue tick. Don't be confused by imitators. Now, it's Valentine's Day, so I've got to showcase the work of my own wife. This is Gayatri's latest, How So Then? And it's on China. Well, it is the Chinese New Year. Kung Hei Fa Choi.
Remember 9/11? Remember the terrorists killing innocent people in the United States, Britain, France, Germany? Remember these countries then fighting these terrorist organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the war on terror? There's one country in particular at war with these same terrorist organizations, a country that has more Muslims than the entire population of the EU, a country where one province has more mosques than the entirety of the United States. That country is China. Yes, China. The ones you see them attacking in the news over coronavirus, Hong Kong, Tibet, Taiwan, Huawei. Lately, China has been defamed over its Muslim Uyghurs. You see, there's this group, the East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement. For decades, the United States has designated it a terrorist organization because they've been found fighting everywhere, from Afghanistan to Syria to Libya. The East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement is China's Al-Qaeda, and all means of de-radicalization is being used to defeat them. This East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement, though still involved in terrorism, has now been removed by the US from the designated terrorist organization list. And others, like Twitter and even the British Foreign Office, have taken up the ETIM cause. War is peace and peace is war. Yes, the authors of the WMD hoax are at it again. But why? Weren't we all supposed to be fighting against Al-Qaeda and ISIS? Is it to do with weakening China? Is it to stop its economic rise? Is spreading fake news about China, Huawei and its Muslims and the rest the way to stop China's growing power? You decide. Muslims from Palestine to Kashmir to Iran must surely wonder about that. But China will solve its extremism problem. And China will not allow any foreign country to interfere in her domestic affairs any longer. President Biden, take note.
Quite funky that, actually. Well done, young Ruben. A star is born. Do follow them, will you? How So Then on Twitter. How So Then. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, my poll is doing amazing business. Almost 1,000 votes in less than 20 minutes. Will Trump begin preparations for a 2024 presidential run? Yes, 71%. No, 19%. C, Ivanka instead. Actually, rather weak, 10%. 974 people have voted. Let's see if our first guest of the evening has a view on all of that. He is, of course, literally the one and the only Dr. Chris Hedges. Chris, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Very nice to see you again. When I do see you, he's vanished. Chris, can you hear me? Yeah. Chris?
Yes.
You're welcome. I gave you this big fulsome build-up and you missed it all. But never mind. No. Never mind. You can get it on catch up.
Okay.
Listen, Donald Trump's acquittal. Only man ever to be impeached twice, only man ever to be acquitted twice. Wasn't it all just a terrific waste of time and money? Wasn't it all just displacement activity by the Democrats?
Yeah, it was posturing, especially by the Democratic Party, that was responsible in many ways not only for Trump, but for the institution of a series of measures that violate constitutional law that were carried out by Trump, but had also been carried out by Obama. So yes, it was, and everybody knew the outcome in advance. So yeah, it was kind of a political theater.
Yeah, it's not that your government doesn't have other things to do. Of course, it has a great many at home and abroad. I was saying in my opening remarks that for those who voted for Joe Biden on the promise that he was going to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal, for example, the news that actually they will only rejoin it if Iran complies with a series of unacceptable demands from Iran's point of view, meaning that the Americans will not be rejoining the Iran nuclear deal. These kind of things are bound to become a disappointment to different sections of the electorate. The 1,400 instead of the 2,000. The failure to do these things will eventually cost the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between the Trump administration and the Biden administration is largely rhetorical. I mean, on the Middle East, nobody's talking about moving the embassy back to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem, by the way, which was supported by Chuck Schumer. The deep disconnection and anger, all of it legitimate by a dispossessed working class, is not going to be addressed. In fact, the only way it's addressed is by shutting it down through cancel culture. And I was against removing Trump from social media for this reason. So they will demonize them. They already are demonizing them. This is what the media platforms which serve the Democratic Party establishment are doing. They are being censored through social media, Silicon Valley media outlets. So we're going to try to erase them. We're going to make them go away. We're not going to deal with the root problem that would drive people to storm the Capitol in anger. And what is the result? The result will be that it will exacerbate both the anger and probably the extremist violence because it becomes the only way. I'm not condoning it, of course, in any way, but it becomes the only way left by which these people can express themselves in a closed political system.
It's very dangerous, isn't it? Because we both know, and you don't need to look in the crystal ball, you can read the book, by suppressing, rolling a rock over something doesn't make it go away. Just that under that rock, it becomes even more toxic. This is your thesis, isn't it? That whether Trump runs again or not is immaterial. If he runs again, he'll be a more toxic Trump. And if he doesn't run again, somebody more dangerous than Donald Trump will emerge in his stead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, perhaps the kind of dark blessing of Trump is that he was so inept. He had no real organizational abilities. He had no real political ideology. He couldn't pay attention. He had sort of the attention span of a 4-year-old. But yes, Trump responded to a phenomena. I remember speaking with the great scholar of fascism, Fritz Stern, once, who grew up in Nazi Germany, left as a refugee. He taught at Columbia University. And he said in Germany there was a yearning for fascism before the word fascism was invented. And that's what you get here. So Trump is a symptom. Trump is a product. Trump is not the disease. And with or without Trump, if you don't deal with the serious enemy and dislocation and disenfranchisement and rupture of social bonds that have afflicted the white working class, and in fact you demonize them, calling them deplorables the way Hillary Clinton has done, or using cancel culture to block their speech and shut them out of social media, you're exactly right. What you're doing is dumping fuel on a fire.
Yes. Does anyone other than people of your caliber ever talk about that? Is there anyone, for example, in the Democratic Party that understands that Trump is the product, he's not the disease?
Well, not in the Democratic Party establishment, because, of course, they're all corporate mandarins. We only have one party in the United States. It's the corporate party. And you can vote for its friendly fascism face, where it talks about diversity, or a species of corporate colonialism, where women and people of color and people with different sexual orientations run the empire. Or you can get its kind of more vulgar, crude, racist face embodied in a figure like Trump. But the system marches forward. And I think, as you mentioned, in terms of the Biden administration, very, very little other than a rhetorical and perhaps a certain amount of civility or decorum that's brought back. Very little intends to change, and that's very dangerous.
Now, will he now begin? You gave us response to his acquittal that the MAGA, Make America Great Again project was just beginning, and that much lay ahead. What do you think he means by that, Chris?
Well, I think he would like to resuscitate his political career. I don't know if that's going to be possible. I mean, I found the removal of Trump from his social media quite frightening, not because, of course, I approve of much of what Trump tweeted, but because it shows the power, the wholesale power of censorship by these monoliths out of Silicon Valley. And I think that as the situation deteriorates, this censorship will become more pronounced. So they may be able to cut out a figure like Trump, but then they'll get somebody like Tom Cotton or Mike Pompeo, both of whom want to run and are a much more adept and therefore much more dangerous political entity.
The 75 million that voted for Trump, are they potentially transferable to either of those two individuals or others? Or does Trump have to find maybe a more direct surrogate, one of his own family?
That's a good question, and I don't know, is the short answer. Clearly, Trump, and you saw it in the fact that Republican figures in the Senate refused to impeach him, although many of them, including Mitch McConnell, loathe Trump because they fear him. How effectively he can mobilize his base to resurrect his own career, promote one of his own, or do we see the rise of another demagogue in the figure of Pompeo or someone else? That's an unknown. But that the kindling is there for that kind of political extremism is without doubt.
What does Joe Biden have in mind for the tens of millions of unemployed Americans, the people still facing eviction, the people that he seems to imagine $1,400 when they get it will somehow allow them to cancel their debt, as if people have only incurred $1,400 worth of debt in an entire year. What does Biden have to say to these people? What is he going to do for these people?
Well, he doesn't work for those people, and he hasn't throughout his entire political career. He used to be called Senator Credit Card because that's where a lot of the big credit card companies are based, who also employed his son, Hunter. He has assiduously served corporate and imperial power. He was one of the authors of the Patriot Act. He's talked about a new domestic terrorism law. I think that's what he's going to say to them. So you're going to take it. You're going to swallow it. He's going to serve big business and corporate entities, as he always have. And if you don't like it, he's going to use the formidable resources of the state to crush you.
And finally, on his foreign policy, he did, to be fair, avoid the potential cataclysm of the START treaty running out. He did talk with the Chinese leader, Xi, on the telephone for 2 hours this week. Notwithstanding the criticism I just made about his Iranian démarche, is at least some stability vis-à-vis the superpowers of Russia and China likely to be a hallmark of Joe Biden?
No, the Democratic Party will ramp up the red baiting, the use of Russia as a way to shut down domestic critics. They refuse to acknowledge their own culpability in the betrayal of the working class. They blame the 2016 election on Russia, and Russia is an easier target. They have a much harder time taking on China because everything in the United States is made in China, and there's this Faustian pact between Amazon and Apple and Walmart and all these other companies that use slave labor in China. So, no, I don't think so. I think that there will be attempt to re-knit traditional alliances that Trump ruptured. But I actually don't think there will be seismic differences in terms of foreign and imperial policy between Trump and Biden.
Finally, and I'm grateful for your time, Chris, are the Clintons gone, or do we now have, as it were, the sons and daughters of the Clintons running things?
Well, it's like Tony Blair in Britain. So you had huge segments of the Labour Party that retained loyalty to Blairites and took down Jeremy Corbyn. And you have the same kind of Clinton figures within the Democratic Party, people groomed and subservient to the Clinton machine, and they're there, and they can do a lot of damage in the same way that the Blairites have done a lot of damage in Labour. Interesting.
Chris Hedges, as always, peerless. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. How's the poll going? Will Trump begin preparations for a presidential run? Yes, 71. No, 18. Ivanka instead, 11%. 1,156 people have voted in half an hour. Very, very interesting. You can vote now on my Twitter feed. Now, this week, I did an RT short on a matter on which I seek to dilate once you have seen it. Here it is, my short for RT on the brave new world of transmania. Listen, I need to be quick because my wife has to go and chest feed my 6-month-old baby. She is the birthing parent of my little baby. This transmania has gone far enough. Earlier, a health board comprised of physicians and medical professionals decided that henceforth mothers were no longer, breastfeeding no longer, mother's milk no longer, that everything that was womanhood had to be cancelled in this cancel culture era of ours. All to please a lobby which is completely out of control and is bent towards the interests of a tiny, tiny number of people in Britain. And the lobby, almost none of them trans people themselves, have made it a crime, almost literally, to speak out. In fact, if you're in Scotland when the hate crime bill comes into being, even around your own dinner table, you'd be arrested for speaking like this. Why do I say it's transmania and its supporters transmaniacs? Not because I'm a prude, I'm very far from that. Not because I'm homophobic, I have a Stonewall Award, 30 years old, for standing up for gay rights when there were rather fewer people around in Parliament who were prepared to do it. No, I'm against it because it is cancelling women. It is negating the idea of woman, womanhood, with all of the things that come with it, without which we would have no human race at all. It's women that give birth. It's women that produce mother's milk. And if they didn't, where would we be? The truth is, women's space, women's status, the whole idea of women is under threat in Western countries, my own included, like never before. Do you think the suffragettes went to jail, died on racecourses under charging horses, chained themselves to railings, fought for women's rights so that 100 years later, women could be effectively erased in favor of some amorphous status, all in the interests of liberal mania? I think it's time to call a halt. Whether the Scottish Justice Minister puts me in jail for saying this or not, I no longer care. Men are men and women are women. They each have very carefully, scientifically, and physically designed characteristics. They have roles, the most important of which is that women give birth. I don't care what the consequences are. I'm not cowed by the reign of intellectual terror that sees even prominent feminists, actually particularly prominent feminists, hunted down as if they were wizened old reactionaries for standing up for the rights of women. This has all gone far enough. It's about time we all stood up and be counted. Say no to the reign of intellectual terror. Say no to the no platforming of those who stand up for women. It's time to stand up for women, and men better start joining in too.
Have something to say? Do you disagree with George? Then call us now and give us your view.
If you agree or you disagree, phone the show, let me know. But there's breaking news. It says here, a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Who are they? What's their real names? Oh, Prince Harry and Meghan. Okay, that's a bit more important. A spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex has just confirmed the couple are expecting a baby. The spokesperson said, we can confirm that Archie is going to, that's their son, right, that Archie is going to be a big brother. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are overjoyed to be expecting their second child. Well, congratulations to your Royal Highnesses. That is an interesting question, Chris. Are they still Royal Highnesses? And is therefore this baby a royal baby? I'm sure we'll be fixated for the next 9 months. Or, yeah, what do you think? Is he a royal baby? Why do I care? One man with a point of view on that breaking news and on the foregoing about chest feeding. I'm not making that up, in case any of you thought that was a spoof. Chest feeding, according to the Sussex Hospital Trust, is how we should describe breastfeeding so we can be more inclusive to blokes who identify as women and who can't either breastfeed or chest feed. Am I going mad? Jim Davidson, Britain's great comedian, star of stage, screen and television, has been listening to the show and has phoned in. Jim, welcome.
How are you, George?
I'm the better for hearing your lovely voice. Haven't seen you for ages, Jim. Before I ask you what you're doing,
Yes.
what's your view on this chest feeding and mothers now being described as birthing parents? Has the world gone mad?
I think it's an economic landmine, really, because comedians don't have to pay for script writers anymore, George. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, the world has gone, as the pendulum gone so far back now. We all know we've made mistakes, and if you look at what's going on now with people can't wait to trip people up and say, yes, well done, but should have done it earlier. Yes, well done, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place. And now I think the pendulum's gone too far.
Yeah, but Jim, here's the rub now. You and I are on the same side as Germaine Greer and the radical feminists standing up for women against a lobby that wants to cancel women. Imagine.
I know. Imagine that. Well, first of all, if there was no women, the world would be a terrible place, and I'd be a multi-millionaire, George, as you know. I think the world is going bonkers. Who puts the brakes on here? Who decides where all this stuff is going? We need you to say, hang on, everybody. Let's stop this now, and let's take a step back and look at reality.
Yeah,
what do you think?
That's what I decided to do in making that short, because nobody else will do it, because the political parties are terrified of the trans maniacs. By the way, almost none of whom are trans people themselves. In fact, a lot of trans people have communicated to me in the last 24 hours that they never asked for any of this. This is people being more royal than the king, more Catholic than the Pope. So I've decided I'm going to say this far and no further. And then I wake up this morning, Jim, and a member of the Labour shadow cabinet is proposing that instead of Mr. and Mrs., we should now all address each other as MX.
That'll do me. That'll be a bit confusing on Father's Day.
Indeed, mixomatosis on the Labour front bench. I mean, I'm not an old fogey. I'm not a wizened reactionary. I'm actually there was a time.
You are an old fogey, but there's one thing that everyone should decide, that you should be on the front bench of the Labour Party. An opposition has to have an opposition that has a counter argument, not someone that says you're wrong, you should have done this before and whatever. Now, let's look at Sir Keir Starmer, who I think has an uncanny resemblance to Barney Rubble from the Flintstones. That his job to just say, you should have done it earlier, you should have done this, you should have done that. Is it the opposition, Her Majesty's opposition, has a role? It has a role to hold the government to account and to say, hang on, you're wrong, but we'll help you find a way through. Is that what you would do, George?
It is, and they'd know they'd been in a game if I was on the front bench opposite them. Who knows? Don't know what lies ahead.
Can
Jim.
you wear a hat in the chamber, George?
No, you can't.
No.
Former SAS men will jump on you if you even approach the chamber with a hat on.
You could say it's a wig. I mean, the Speaker used to wear a wig. The Speaker used to wear a wig before that little funny person took over and ruined the whole thing.
I'll need to get a wig. You know that, talking of comedic possibilities, there was a time when I was in Parliament that if you wish to raise a point of order during a vote, you actually had to put on a top hat. And the Sergeant-at-Arms had one under his desk for such eventualities. And I put this top hat on once. Beautiful silk it was, Jim. And I didn't want to take it off. It was absolutely lovely. Now, tell us quickly, what you're doing now? Now that the theatres are closed, how can people follow you, Jim?
Well, they can follow me on my TV station called Ustream. They can get that on www.ustream.com, where it's not just me, but I've got all the comedians, all the guys that are struggling. I formed a TV station so that they can all go on there and do what they need to do. Do you know what, George?
When you say Ustream, do you mean Y-O-U?
No. U as in the letter U. Yeah,
okay.
Uniform stream. But stream is STREME. And it's great. This is the way. If you look at the BBC, if you look at Channel 5 and Channel 4, you know there's someone dictating what is going to be said on that channel. This is what the most wonderful thing is, watching you and listening to you talking sense. We know there's no one going to be your boss, George. Don't you worry about that.
God bless you, Jim. That's a very lovely thing to say. And if Bobby's also on the channel, Bobby Davro, give him my love, will you? I miss you both. Jim.
Take care, old friend.
God bless. Thanks very much.
Keep doing this, George. We need you, George. We need you. There's a bit where the right wing and the left wing join. I've always said it, and it's called common sense. And you're loaded with it. Take care, George.
God bless you, Jim. Thanks very much. That was unexpected. Jim Davidson. And Ustream, that's the letter U, STREME. I'll be logging on to that for sure. Now, relationship goals. I've got them, you've got them, we've all got them. But Jo Barnett is one of the leading dating coaches in the UK. She helps people navigate their personal lives, especially when there is a breakthrough needed. Single, married, or divorced. Married. Jo offers coaching to help people move forward. She even helps people to write the perfect online dating profile. She wrote an ebook in 2012, How to Get a Date Now. She's been interviewed by many other television channels and newspapers, but she's never been on the world stage before. And I'm glad to welcome Jo Barnett. Jo, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. You're following You're following Jim Davidson unexpectedly.
Fabulous.
Now listen, if you were a newlywed or a childless couple, the last 12 months has been marvellous. You certainly know each other a lot better now, if you get my drift. And there's probably a baby coming along soon. If you're a couple with children, like me, lots of children, it's been pretty hellish, actually, trying to keep everything together on the romantic front. What about single people entirely who had no partner to lock down with? This must be the most barren year in human history. Jo, tell us.
So that you've covered a spectrum of relationships there. So we jump straight to singles, and of course that's the area that I specialise in. And I do feel for singles during lockdown. Lockdown was definitely didn't take them into consideration. You know, it's been a challenge, but I do encourage singles to carry on with the dating apps, meeting people, socialising, and within the restrictions, within what you can do, carry on looking to make connections, because no one wants to be on their own during lockdown. And there are plenty of people out there on the apps looking for relationships. So within social distancing and with virtual dating, there's a fair amount of kind of background work that I encourage my clients to do. And it's also a great time to think about what you really want in a relationship and what you've got to bring to the relationship. What do you need to work on in yourself? And people are taking time to really focus on that as well.
You nearly had me for a moment when you said that people should be meeting other people, because I had this vision of making a date that you would walk past somebody in the park but not sit down on the bench with them, because of course that's not allowed. But you mean virtually? Is that really a thing, Jo? Do people date virtually?
Yes, people do everything virtually. You know, the the process is still the same, because before you meet face to face, I would always say you need to have a couple of conversations, and ideally even a FaceTime, to see if there's a connection, because you're wasting your time meeting someone that you have no flow and no communication with. So that process, that sifting process, looking for those common values that share and that click, is the way it's always been. And then once you've had a couple of interactive FaceTime calls, you can arrange for a social distance walk if both of you feel comfortable. And I know plenty of people who have met during lockdown.
Really? I thought all these dating companies and all, I thought they'd all be bust, because people would just be in their own homes and dating would be a dim and distant memory.
You know, it depends which way you take it. There are people who are going to say, right, let's put this on hold. You know, we thought it was a few weeks, a few months. It's now been a year. And there are other people who will be a bit more determined to keep things going and still look for a partner in the same way they would before. The apps are busier than ever. You know, Bumble, really? Tinder, they are Hinge. They've gone through the roof. There are millions of subscribers to these apps. Wow. So it's a good time to be on them.
Not for me. I'd be in big trouble if I was on them because I'm happily married. But I'm sure the singletons listening, watching, will take that on board. I don't want to, because there may be children listening, I don't want to explore too much what this interactivity on the FaceTiming might be. What about people that are in relationships? How do they keep it together in these extraordinary circumstances?
Now, there's a question. So people who are in relationships, it's constant work. You know, people think that a relationship, once you're in a relationship, you're going to be happy and live happily ever after, and it's plain sailing. And actually, that's where the work begins, because you have to constantly work at a relationship. You've got to be thinking about two people now. It's not just you, it's another person, considering their needs, what's going on for them. And I think the mistake people make is we're all so caught up in what we want and getting our needs met and our fulfillment. And sometimes you have to think about what's going on for your partner, what do they need, and making time to do fun things together. You know, doing an activity, watching a movie, listening to a podcast, even cooking, to put some time aside where you turn off all your devices and really give your partner your full attention and just have a fun night in the kitchen, cooking something together, eating something together, and making quality time for your partner. That's what will really nourish a relationship in these difficult times.
Sounds good to me. Now, birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. Is there really nothing new under the sun? Are people still looking for what they always looked for? And do they, by and large, even with the aid of modern technology, still go about it in roughly the same way, Jo?
You know, people have always wanted connection. People feel validated when they have someone to love and someone who loves them. So it really is that simple. What I notice with clients who come to me is that the list is sometimes unrealistic. You know, and if your tick list includes someone who speaks 5 languages and is well-traveled and is a size 8 and has this certain hair color, you're going to find it virtually impossible to meet someone. So what I do is I home in on values, you know, core values that are really important, and then look at those and kind of don't focus on some of the other stuff. Make it more basic and more personal about the things that you actually need rather than the things that you think you need, because we can make it so complicated. And that's what keeps people single, because, you know, they think, well, I've been single this long, I'm not going to compromise. And that's great. But is the bar so high that no one's going to fit that criteria? And do you tick every single box? Because nobody is perfect. And I would like to see people be a bit more realistic in what they're looking for and a bit more giving in what they have to offer. And then I think that we would meet somewhere in the middle and have more chance of people having better, longer lasting relationships.
Joe, how do people follow you? Not that I'm going to, but for those that do, have you got a website people can consult?
I do. It's www.joebarnettdatingcoach.me.uk.
Fabulous. Happy Valentine's Day to you and yours.
And to
Thank
you.
you very much indeed, Joe, for joining us. Let's take a call from Australia. Michael is in Sydney, if you get my drift. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, George. Look, mate, I'd just like to talk about the topic you were talking about before, about transmania.
Yeah.
And I think it transfers across to things like sports as well. I mean, has anyone bothered to stop to ask women athletes, such as people doing taekwondo at the Olympics, or maybe, I don't know, female boxing might be the Olympics soon, or things like that, how they would feel competing against people who had been males all their life until maybe into their mid-20s and suddenly trans over into a female. And also, like, children having the right to pick their gender at age 6 and take hormone replacement therapy to stop their natural development at age 6. They can't even go to the pub. They can't even vote. They can't even drive. But we're giving them the right to choose their gender and take potentially, life-altering, well, basically, hormone physiologically altering medications at their own choice at 6 years of age. And courts and organisations actually, taking children away from parents. There's been cases and calling it child abuse because they won't let their children at age 6 choose their gender. I mean, I know, for example, when I was about 6 years of age, I dressed up a little bit for a party. My parents dressed up. I would take the dress off for a week, but I'm not transgender. I got a girlfriend and I'm very heterosexual. And I just think some of this stuff is crazy. People bother to stop and ask women how they feel about this situation.
Well, a very powerful call, Michael. Thank you for it. Actually, many women athletes have already made clear their absolute rejection. The British Olympic swimmer, is it Sharon Davis? She spoke very strongly about this, and every effort was made, I don't know, maybe it was even successful, to shut her down, to cancel her, because she was making the point that girls and young women are training, putting in all the hours to become prize-winning athletes in the swimming pools, on the tracks, and so on. And all a man has to do is declare to identify as a woman, and bang, he's in the race against them. And with his superior male strength, is likely to win. It's a complete outrage, I think. Michael, last word to you.
Yeah, look, George, I just totally agree. And my daughter identifies as bisexual, and whenever she says, well, I marry a girl or whatever, she's 11 now. I say, well, look, sweetie, it's really too young to really know what you are, and what if you are? I'll support you and I'll love you. I'm not homophobic. I'm not I support gay rights. I voted yes in the Australian referendum. So it's not a matter of being anti-gay or queer or transphobic or anything. It's just a matter of basic common sense.
Well said. Common sense from Sydney. That's Michael in Australia. Thank you very much. By all means, if you have a different point of view, call the show. The number is, if you are in the UK, 02077 982 255. Or if you're in the US, 001 757 744 4480. Or you can tweet us at George Galloway at RTUK News. So, whatever your view on anything you've heard here or anything you're going to hear on the Tonight Show, please let me know. Trump, should he begin? Is he going to begin preparations? Yes, 71%. No, 19%. Ivanka, instead, no, she's only got 10% support. You can vote on my Twitter feed. But first, it's time for the news with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
At least 15 million people in the UK have had their first coronavirus jab, Vaccine Minister Nazim Zahawi has said. The milestone was reached just over 2 months after the first jab was delivered in Britain on December the 8th. It comes after ministers said the UK was on track to meet its pledge of offering a vaccine to everyone in the top 4 priority groups by Monday. From Monday, the vaccine rollout is being expanded to include over 65s and those deemed clinically vulnerable. One dose of a COVID-19 vaccine gives 67% protection after 3 weeks, a leading epidemiologist has said. Professor Tim Spector of King's College London, who runs the Zoe COVID-19 surveillance app, said data collected from 50,000 users vaccinated with either the Pfizer or Oxford AstraZeneca jabs showed that one dose gave 46% protection after 2 weeks, rising to 67% after 3 to 6 weeks. The app uses information submitted by more than 4 million users across the world to predict and track coronavirus infections across the UK and other countries. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has ordered the country's biggest city, Auckland, to go into lockdown after the discovery of 3 new local coronavirus cases. The measure will last 3 days and require residents to stay at home. Ardern said the country was going hard and early after the cases were identified. New Zealand has won widespread praise for its handling of the pandemic, going months without community transmission. The country, with a population of 5 million, has recorded just over 2,300 cases of COVID and just 25 deaths. The measure in Auckland requires its 1.7 million residents to stay at home except for essential shopping and work. Schools and non-essential shops will close and entry in and out of the city is restricted. A woman who made sexual assault allegations against Scotland's former First Minister Alex Salmond has claimed that the Holyrood inquiry into the saga has been more traumatic for her in many ways than the trial was. The woman was one of 9 who gave evidence against the former First Minister at the High Court last year. Salmond was cleared of all 13 of the sexual assault charges against him. A committee is now investigating the Scottish Government's handling of the original complaints against Mr Salmond. The inquiry was intended to ensure that similar mistakes were not made in the future and that women could feel confident in coming forward with complaints about alleged sexual misconduct. But the woman told the BBC that she believed it had descended into a political fight that made it less likely that other women would report any concerns. She said the row had effectively allowed the government to get away with not being properly scrutinised on its procedures. A 22-year-old Indian climate activist has been arrested after sharing a document intended to help farmers protest against new agricultural laws. Disha Ravi is accused of sedition and criminal conspiracy. The document she shared, a toolkit which suggests ways of helping the farmers, was first posted by the prominent campaigner Greta Thunberg. Ravi, a student and one of the founders of the Indian branch of the Fridays for Future climate strike, was arrested by Delhi police. The protests, now in their 3rd month, mark the biggest challenge India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has faced. New laws loosen rules around the sale, pricing and storage of farm produce, which have protected India's farmers from the free market for decades. Farmers fear that the new laws will threaten decades-old concessions, such as assured prices, and weaken their bargaining power, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation by private companies. The Modi government has offered to suspend the laws, but the farmers want them replaced altogether. US President Joe Biden has said his predecessor Donald Trump's acquittal for inciting mob violence is a reminder that democracy is fragile. 7 Republicans joined the Democrats in voting to convict, falling short of the 2/3 majority needed to do so. Biden said the charge relating to Trump's role in the Capitol riot last month was not in dispute, while seeking to move on from the process. Trump has welcomed his acquittal, calling his impeachment a witch hunt. In the Senate on Saturday, the trial ended with a 57-43 vote in favor of conviction. United Arab Emirates Hope mission has returned its first picture of Mars. The spacecraft entered into an orbit around the red planet on Tuesday, making the UAE the first Arab nation in history to have a scientific presence at Earth's near neighbour. The first image will be followed by many similar views of Mars. Hope was put into a wide orbit so it could study the planet's weather and climate systems, which mean that it will also see the planet's full disk. And finally, if it happens, it will surely be known as Boris's Borough. After Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister proposed a link between Scotland and Northern Ireland. His idea was for a bridge, but now it seems a 25-mile undersea tunnel is the way forward, according to the Secretary of State for Scotland. Alistair Jack reiterated his support for the link ahead of the expected release of a study that could kick off a formal consultation on the idea. He said that he had talked to the Prime Minister and that a tunnel appeared to be the most viable way forward. Johnson first backed the idea of connecting Larne in Northern Ireland to Stranraer in Scotland when he was Foreign Secretary in 2018. But this appears to have fallen out of favour as too complex and expensive, with a tunnel now seen as the preferred options. It would be about 25 miles long, not far off the Channel Tunnel's 31 miles, and provide a road and rail link. A report on UK transport infrastructure by the head of Network Rail, Sir Peter Hendy, is reportedly imminent and expected to say that the project is possible. That could kick off a formal government feasibility study. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Welcome indeed, and be sure and vote on my poll about Donald Trump's intentions in the 2024 presidential election. You can vote on my Twitter feed at George Galloway. Lots of comments on the US election and so on. Alberto says it's difficult to believe that a once great and free people can be so easily deceived by the mediocrity and the lies of the two oligarchic parties. And there isn't even any visible opposition to these liars and charlatans. Unbelievable. And Patricia said, President Biden was doing the best he could. Give the guy a break and consider what he was up against. And Robert says Biden's a joke. He should be in an old people's home. And Joseph said the Republican Party cannot stand Trump. Well, the Republican leadership, sure. Doug says it was a farce. Trump is a criminal. But the impeachment was a charade. And Lex says, I don't think Trump really wanted to be president. I never thought he'd actually be elected. The presidential runs were all supposed to be simple airtime for his ego and businesses. Well, he didn't account for how bad a candidate Hillary Clinton would turn out to be. And Andy says, of course Trump will run again. His ego is bigger than Jeff Bezos's wallet. No, nothing in the world is bigger than that. He's got to feed it somehow. The scary thing is, though, I can't see Biden holding him off. And Siobhan says, no, because of his age. However, he may be preparing his offspring for president. And John said, I think he will run for 2024. Whether he should is another question. The people are looking for a change from the establishment, and he offered that. And Andy says the system is too rigged to let him win again, and the media will give him the worst possible coverage or cancel him. Bet you he will have huge influence, though, and send the Democrats wild. And Keith says, I hope he does. I don't agree with some of the things he did, Syria, Israel, but he fought a hard fight with every MSM outlet against him. Imagine how bad the planet would be if Hillary had won. And Biden is going back on nearly every promise he made for his 100 days. Harry makes the good point, I think the bull point, that Donald Trump will be 78 years old in 4 years' time. I'm not sure he'd want the grief again, although his ego may force him to run. And Danny says ego will push him now, and as much as I wanted him to beat Biden, I think he's the wrong candidate for the next election to take on Kamala Harris for the second term. And Howie says 320 million people in the US. If Trump, Biden, Clinton-style leaders is the best, they have to offer their citizens, all the rest of the world, what does it really say about humanity? Leaders of the free world, I wouldn't let them lead a song. And Cyrus says maybe he'll run for Republican office, but not for president. That's intriguing, Cyrus. And in response to my RT short, Alison says, if someone who was previously referred to as a man says that they would now prefer to be referred to as a woman, that's absolutely fine. We just change the way we talk about that particular individual. What we don't do is insist that from now on, all men must be referred to as women, because that would be insane. So if a person who was previously referred to as a mother says that they would prefer to be referred to as a birthing parent, is there anybody? That would be absolutely fine. We just change the way we talk about that individual. But why on earth would anyone insist that all mothers must now be referred to as birthing parents? It's insanity. And Anne says, as difficult as it is for me to say this, George, I agree with every single word. Time to get out and tell it how it is. Why, thank you, Anne. And Sama says, women are not birthing and feeding machines for your children. Trans women are a minority, as you point out in the beginning. And as minorities, we should support and protect them. Trans women are women, and that is something neither you or me or any law can change. Please remember, not all women can have children or breastfeed. Are these women not women too? Sama, why don't you call me? 02077 982 255. If you're in the US, 001 757 744 4480. But just for your information, the last thing in the whole world I regard women as is either birthing or feeding machines for my children. I take very, very great exception to that. And Ford says, I totally agree, George. It used to be a professional courtesy to ask clients how they wished to be addressed. Not a problem complying, but this insatiable desire to mold society to the calling of a tiny number is just not on. First world problems. Let's hear some problems from the rest of the world, which may have greater connection to reality. Vijay Prashad is an historian and journalist and the head of the Tricontinental Institute. As such, he's constantly on the move, and we catch up with him now in Latin America, about which I want to talk to him. Vijay, welcome. You're our global roving correspondent without pay, but all the tea you can drink. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can we talk about Ecuador first of all? For those who can't place Ecuador, it was the Ecuadorian embassy that Julian Assange was given asylum in by the previous president, President Rafael Correa, who won the affection and admiration of many people around the world for giving safe haven to Julian Assange. When his presidential term ended, he was succeeded by a man who at least pretended to be his fan, his supporter, was going to govern in the same way. Believe it or not, his name was Lenin Moreno, but he was no sooner in office and he was literally selling Julian Assange to the Americans, to the IMF. His popularity then became so low, he didn't even run in the recent presidential election, which took place last week. Please, Vijay, tell us what happened in the Ecuador election.
Well, it's great to be with you again, George. The election was, as expected, a spectacle. The candidate who represents the citizens' revolution, Andres Arauz, won the largest number of votes, but was not able to go above the threshold, which would have prevented a second round. He won roughly 36% of the vote. He needed to get 40%. As a consequence, he's going to go in a few months into a second round. The entire opposition has come together. The Organization of American States, which, as you know, is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and played its own shenanigans in Bolivia in November 2019, has basically thrown its gloves in the ring alongside the opposition. The United States government seems to have tilted the opposition, put its finger on the scale. Everybody with power seems to be with this opposition. If you just count up the number of votes, they'd get 70%. Andrés Arauz is going around the country trying his best to lift his numbers above the 50% mark. It's going to be really difficult, George. It's really tough when you're up against the oligarchy in Ecuador, international institutions, the United States government, and the OAS. It's hard to go against all of them when they're standing against you.
And could he have done anything differently? Could the people who support him have done anything differently to get above that crucial 40%, do you think?
Well, it's hard to say. In the period right before the election, there was just a set of dirty tricks, things that, we've seen over the years being done when, for instance, our old friends, the CIA, get involved and people like them. For instance, there was a news story that broke before the elections which suggested that Andrés Arauz, who's an economist trained at the very best university in Mexico, spent 2 years in the government of Rafael Correa, is a man with no blemish. Nobody has any corruption allegation against Andrés Arauz. Forget corruption allegation. There's nothing negative said about him. But a few days before the election, a story was released to some choice newspapers alleging that Mr. Arauz's campaign was financed by the FARC organization in Colombia. These are the former Marxist guerrillas who are now above ground and have a political organization in Colombia. It's very clear that this was a total fabrication. In fact, the video that was released was said to be set in Colombia. Turned out that the birds were wrong. The birds that were in the background chirping in the video are not to be found there. So this was a dirty tricks attempt to smear his campaign. This, I think, had an impact on the voting share that he got. But also, one of the opposition candidates, Yaqui Perez, comes across as a leader of the indigenous bloc inside Ecuador, when in very plain fact, he is essentially a stooge of the US State Department. He came out even calling for the Organization of American States to get involved. Nobody in their right mind who's a democratically minded person asks for the Organization of American States to get involved. So these matters, this dirty tricks campaign, the muddiness of having an indigenous leader stand against you, this did have an impact on the election result in the first round.
And will this indigenous leader likely be the victor?
Well, again, let's see. But by all indications, there seems to be a lot of pressure to push the opposition back into office. I mean, the entire state bureaucracy is essentially on the side of the opposition. This is an election that should help people understand how democracy or democratic institutions today have been so badly skewed. The democratic spirit has been sucked out of them. Money has really destroyed things, but also the way in which state institutions are utilized to advantage people in power. It's a good example of how democracy is essentially, become quite the opposite of what democracy should be.
Very interesting. Now, switching continents. I know that you're a man who follows China closely. We aired a video which I've no doubt will be controversial. earlier in the show, Vijay, in which the people who made the video sought to debunk what they believe, I personally also believe, is a deliberate campaign of falsification of China's relations with its Muslim population, which is a huge Muslim population, bigger than the entire population of the European Union. And if China had a Muslim problem, with that number of Muslims, we'd know much more about it. Do you share the view that China is being unfairly targeted on the Muslim question?
Well, I'll come to that in a minute. But the first thing, George, is that who's lecturing China about Islamophobia? It's the US State Department, it's the Europeans and others. I mean, look at these countries' record when it comes to wars in the predominantly Muslim lands. I mean, Mike Pompeo lecturing China about Islamophobia should make somebody just, laugh, because after all, he was once the head of the CIA. What is the US war in Afghanistan but a crime against the people of Afghanistan? There is that actually illegal war against Iraq that the United States prosecuted. I mean, then there's the war in Libya, where the United States cavalierly destroyed a country. So to have the United States stand up and say we are on the side of Muslims strikes me as, it beggars the imagination, frankly. So one thing is, well, the messenger should be questioned. And the United States, in the middle of its trade war with China, it seems convenient that it picks up on the question of the Uyghurs, just as it's convenient that the United Kingdom talks about democracy in Hong Kong. I mean, seriously, Hong Kong was your colony until yesterday, and now you're interested in democracy. Why didn't the United Kingdom give Hong Kong democracy the day after they were able to get Hong Kong, in the aftermath of the Opium War? So these people talking about democracy and Islamophobia strikes me as something that should raise the hackles of a normal person. But if we come directly to what's happening in Xinjiang, there's a lot of evidence already in the public domain about this. Look, it's a reality that China has, since the 1950s, struggled to integrate minorities. After all, there was the Minorities Commission, which at the time had the Dalai Lama as its chairperson. This is something that China has struggled with. China has also, I think, in an amazing way, been able to abolish poverty. 850 million people brought out of poverty, lifted themselves out of poverty. This includes the people in Xinjiang, lived in wretched poverty for generations. These are things that the Chinese government is doing. They also faced a very serious threat of, radicalism coming across the border from Central Asia. The groups that came from, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. The seriousness, gravity of that issue had to be met. Now, instead of going and just sort of jailing everybody and killing everybody, the Chinese developed a procedure of educating people, trying to integrate them. Now, one can call that a re-education camp or whatever it is, but it's certainly not Guantanamo. And by the way, Guantanamo, which the United States runs on the occupied part of the island of Cuba, is still open for business. There are still people in Guantanamo who are in prison, whereas what one sees in Urumqi and other parts of Xinjiang are people who had very radical, some of them quite dangerous beliefs, who have been brought in and they're going through a process. I mean, you've got to understand what they are doing, not just throw labels at, a process that's very complicated. I don't presume to have an easy answer to what a government must do when confronted by this kind of radicalism or extremism. What a government must do is it must understand the process that it's going through, and others need to try to figure out, well, what are they doing, and do you have any better suggestions? Look, the United States' better suggestion is permanent incarceration. Is that what they want?
Yeah, or drones. Vijay Prashad, thank you as always for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Go safely in Latin America. Now, there's been some kind of dramatic development on the poll. Breaking news on the poll. A significant swing in the last few minutes. A massive change Ivanka is slowly catching up. Will Trump begin preparations for a 2024 presidential run? A, yes, 48%, down 23%. No, 13%, down 6%. C, Ivanka instead, 39%, a rise of 29%. Who put out the message that it's Ivanka that is the one? That is absolutely fascinating. Now, Chris, is that on Twitter only or on Twitter? Are we not on Telegram tonight? Give me these to see if there is this dichotomy that we discovered last week. Give me a 60-second break, why don't you?
Well, how did I do?
I'm sorry, Prime Minister. At no point did you drive on the left-hand side of the road, and instead of driving us forward, you made several U-turns. We haven't gone anywhere.
Well, I think you'll find if you turn backwards enough times, eventually you'll go forward. So, did I pass?
No, you failed miserably.
But my teacher said I'd get much higher grades.
Better luck next time.
This doesn't happen to people like me. You leave me no choice.
I'm sorry, but rules are rules, even for Prime Ministers. What on earth is that?
My mutant pet.
Dominic Cummings?
No, big algorithm. Get it?
Global higher education with one of the world's best-known iconoclasts. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
What we have identified with a bit of detective work is that whoever is behind the big lobby for Ivanka Trump is not on Telegram, which means they're not Russians, because she's only got 14% support on Telegram, but she's got 39% support on Twitter. The plot thickens. You can still vote right up to 9 o'clock. Will it be Ivanka instead? Will it be Donald? Or will it be neither? Now, this is the spot where I look back at the 7 days in our checkered history. This is the week, and it's another momentous one. In 1929, it wasn't all chocolates and roses on Valentine's Day. In Chicago, it was bullets and wreaths when 7 gangsters were killed in what became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Killed, allegedly, on a... Why are we saying allegedly? He can't sue us, and it definitely was him. But it says here, killed allegedly on Al Capone's orders. Now, it wasn't a wise move in 1971 by Richard Nixon. That's not Richard Nixon, that's Al Capone, but that's Richard Nixon when he installed a secret taping system in the White House. It, of course, proved his downfall with the Watergate cover-up when the tapes were replayed and his guilt was confirmed. It is interesting. I was just talking to a good friend of mine, a former captain of the Scotland rugby team earlier today, Finlay Calder. Richard Nixon was miles ahead. He was coasting against a very, very weak Democratic Party candidate, George McGovern. He had absolutely no need to do any of that stuff, let alone talk on tape about what he had done. Now, on this, in this week, British and US bombers pounded the ancient German city of Dresden with high explosives and incendiaries on this Valentine's Day, actually, in 1945. The city's population was swollen with refugees, and the death toll from the massive bombing, which leveled the city, was somewhere between 25,000, the British claim, and 100,000, the Nazi claim. And it was on this day in 1989 when Iranian Muslim leader Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa against a death threat. A fatwa and a death threat against British author Salman Rushdie and his publishers over the book Satanic Verses. Not because it was dull and boring, which it is, but because it was allegedly blasphemous. There we go. What's with all that? Have we got a lawyer through there? Allegedly blasphemous? The former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri was killed in an assassination in West Beirut in 2005 outside the St. George Hotel, which I know well, when the car he was travelling in was blown up. The British government launched the new decimal currency in 1971. Alas, I'm so old I remember it, when everything that was 10 old pence became 10 new pence, thus more than doubling in price. Now here's another I remember only too well. On February 15th in 2003, an estimated 6 to 11 million people around the world took to the streets to protest against the war with Iraq. There were around 2 million of us marching in London alone, and I was one of their leaders. Together with the other leaders of the Stop the War coalition, we had built up to what was, and I think always will be, the biggest ever demonstration in the history of this country. 2 million people demanding no war on Iraq. It was bitterly cold. If you were there in Hyde Park, you'll know what I mean. It couldn't actually have been colder in Britain than it was that day, but there were still millions of people on the march. And by the time I came to speak, I think I may have been second last. They usually kept me to the end to keep the crowd there, but actually the cold was such that they brought me forward and put me on. There were still very well over 1 million people standing in front of me when I spoke in Hyde Park on that day in 2003. Now, this was the week in 1959 that Cuba's revolutionary leader, Fidel Castro, became the country's youngest ever premier. At the age of 32, he was sworn in as prime minister in the cabinet room of the presidential palace in Havana. I am one of his biographers, of course, and since I raised it here, there's been quite a rush on my Fidel Castro handbook that you can get in my shop online. I'll get you the address because I always forget it. But since I promoted it on here, we've actually had to send a truck all the way to High Wycombe, where our remaining stocks of the book were stored in a container. And now we've got them in our shop. So if you want the Fidel Castro handbook dedicated and signed personally by me, then you can do that through my shop. There it is there, www.georgegalloway.shop. Now, in 1963, again, I'm old enough to remember this too, the Beatles hit #1 in the UK with Please, Please Me. I bought it. The British Parliament voted to join what was then the European Common Market in 1972, and we joined on the 1st of January in 1973. It's been all downhill for the Common Market since that day. Now, the serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, was sentenced to life in prison by a court in Wisconsin in 1992 for murdering and dismembering 15 young men and boys. Dahmer was unable to convince the jury that his cannibalism and necrophilia were the result of madness. In 1984, he was murdered by a fellow inmate who bludgeoned him to death with a metal bar. Senator Joe McCarthy, the US witch hunter of communists attempted to subpoena two generals, two American Army generals, in 1954. But the Secretary of the US Army ordered the two generals to ignore the summons. Now, hundreds of people clamored to see the marriage of pop stars Lulu and the late Maurice Gibb of the Bee Gees in a Buckinghamshire church in 1969 in this week. That one didn't last. Now, allegedly, our editor, Ron Mackay, knew Lulu in her earlier incarnation in Glasgow on the streets of Denniston, but that may be an old wives' tale. And on the 19th of February in 1997, China's paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, died at the age of 92 after suffering from failing health for several years. Ground control to John Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth, landed safely in the Atlantic Ocean in this week in 1962. He went into politics and was a Democrat senator for Ohio, his home state, for 24 years. His interest in space medicine then led him to persuade NASA to send him back into space at the age of 77 in November 1998. He completed the 9-day mission on the space shuttle with another 6 astronauts to become the oldest man in space until I get there. And in 1986, in another space venture, the Soviet Union opened a new phase in space exploration with the launch of the world's biggest space station, Mir, which means, in English, peace. And it lasted for 15 years up there. 3 years before, in 1983, hundreds of people died in the Indian state of Assam as fierce fighting raged in the run-up to the Indian election. This followed the assassination of the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. Villages were set on fire and bridges and offices burned. According to unofficial figures, nearly 3,000 Muslims died in the riots, massacred by the ethnic Assamese and Lalungs, who wanted to evict them as part of protests against so-called foreigners. That's it, 7 days that shaped our present. That certainly was the week that was. Let's take a call from Kenny in London. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to talk about the trans issue that you were speaking about earlier.
Yeah,
I've got a book in front of me by Douglas Murray. It's called The Madness of Crowds, and he's got a chapter called Trans, and he talks about it. And he's got a paragraph here that I'd just like to read out, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was standing on the corner at a quarter.
All right, I'll get him off. He's a nutter. Kenny in London is a nutter. Let's see if Joshua in Manchester is any better. Joshua.
Hi, George. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you follow that one? You're not going to sing to me, are you?
Unfortunately not. I wish I could sing. I'm a big fan of yours, George, and I'm a member of the your party, the Workers' Party of Britain.
Okay.
There was just one thing that I disagreed with you on, and I wanted to discuss with you, and that was the Uyghur Muslims in China.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So you've said that in the past that the government of America and the government of Britain, like, they don't care about the Muslims in Iraq or anywhere else in the world.
Well, that's incontestable, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And whilst I agree with that, does that make the claims about China inherently untrue? Could it not just be like a convenient stick to beat China with, but still be true?
It could, of course, in theory, but as Vijay Prashad pointed out earlier, given that it's coming from the people that told us Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, was bristling with chemical, nuclear, biological weapons, which turned out to be a gigantic lie, given that these claims are coming from the same lie machine, I think they ought to be taken with a substantial pinch of salt. I think Vijay was extremely honest in how he dealt with the question. He said that China has struggled with radicalized, extremized, fanatic Muslims, supporters of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Now, you've got two choices of how you deal with these people. You either kill them, as the United States would undoubtedly do if they emerged in Alabama, or you try and de-radicalize them. And China's trying to de-radicalize them. Last word to you, Joshua.
So, yeah, I agree that I wouldn't necessarily take the government's word or the media's word on that. But, I mean, there are charities like Amnesty International saying that there are 1 million people being held against their will. Are they lying? I mean, what evidence have you seen that they're not seeing?
I'm surprised that a member of the Workers' Party of Britain is praying in aid Amnesty International. That's a new one on me. But the reality is we don't know how many people are being de-radicalized. I believe it's far, far, far fewer than 1 million. But it will be some thousands because this East Turkmenistan Islamic fighting organization has got thousands of people fighting in Syria. It's got thousands of people fighting in Libya. It's got actually thousands of people fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh, most recently, as mercenaries for the Azeri forces there. So if there's thousands of them fighting overseas, I would think there's probably quite a few thousand Chinese Al-Qaeda types in China, wouldn't you?
I mean, well, that's possible. If there were millions, I would say that sounds more like a collective punishment type thing rather than just targeting, people, terrorists, for example.
Well, that's not how I see it. It's not how I think Vijay Prashad, who is not a member of the Workers' Party, saw it earlier. You've got the responsibility as the man making these inferences to give me some evidence for that, don't you, Joshua?
Yeah, I agree that it's on people that claim things to prove it rather than you to disprove it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know where to gather evidence either way. If we can't trust the media, which I mean, I agree, they tell a lot of lies, and we can't trust government. Where should we be looking?
Well, I trust the information from China, and China has been honest about it, that it has a problem with fanatic Muslims. So do we. Now, we put them in prison forever, and rightly so. In America, they would be killed. They would be killed extrajudicially, actually, in America. In China, they are not being. But what is the best way to deal with fanatic Islamist extremists is, of course, up to every country themselves to decide. Joshua, thanks for that call. Let's hear from Eric in Dublin on the tunnel. Go ahead, Eric.
Good evening, George.
Good evening to you, sir.
I'm a big fan of your show. I really appreciate what you say and what you talk about. You have enough of a platform there for everybody, so I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for inviting me on. And George, I just got back to the tunnel. Yeah, it's for me as a proud Irishman from the Republic of Ireland. I'm all open for a wider Ireland and expanding into Europe and the UK, which is our closest partner. But I have I think we need to think this a bit more when it comes to opening up a border between the UK and Ireland via a tunnel. We need to, especially when it comes to immigration. You look at Calais and Calais, the British tunnel there between the UK and France, and the issue that has with immigration, people coming in. I just think this could be another funnel for illegal immigration coming into Ireland, which we have a massive problem now via Belfast.
Here was me naively thinking you meant the other way.
No, well, naively you might be, but George,
see, Eric, here's my point. There is free movement of East European, Central European, cheap labour into the Republic of Ireland because you're in the EU. But no such right now exists in Britain. So if there was going to be any illegal immigration. It would almost certainly be the other way around, Eric. It would be Eastern European people that weren't now allowed to come to Britain, but are allowed to go to Ireland, who might try and get through the tunnel. But it won't be that kind of tunnel, Eric. It'll be like the Channel Tunnel. You'll drive your car onto a railway, and the railway will take you there.
Yes, I know, George. It all starts out in a very positive manner, but eventually there's many loopholes which are exploited by... I've lost you there.
No, you haven't. You've done well. Thanks, Eric, in Dublin. Simon is in London on the China question. Go ahead, Simon.
Hi, George. The thing I want to bring up is with regards to what Josh just said with regards to the Uyghurs. You never seem to understand. Basically, what you seem to do is you always seem to give China all the credit with regards to Uyghurs and the treatment. It's very clear from the media, from everything that I've seen, that Chinese are treating Uyghur Muslims terribly. And yet you won't say anything against Chinese purely because they share your ideology, the socialist ideology.
Well, let me stop you there for a moment. Why do you think a media that cares nothing for the plight of Muslims in Kashmir, in Iraq, in Palestine, in Iran, in Libya, in Afghanistan, actually suddenly cares about the plight of Muslims in China? Why do you think that is, Simon?
I'm not talking about those countries. I'm not saying the Western countries.
You said,
I'm not saying the Western media is not. Hold on.
Well,
I'm not saying Western media is not biased. Western media is terrible, as I said. You've seen it yourself with the BBC. But what I'm saying is, you never criticize the Chinese purely because they themselves share a socialist agenda like yourself.
Well, let me come back to that point, because China's actually a booming capitalist economy, as well as aspects of socialism, and I'm not involved in any of that. I'm telling you what I think, just like I told you on this day in 2003, what I thought about the same Britain and America now defending Muslims in China, about to launch a devastating war against the Muslims in Iraq. So I tell the truth as I see it, Simon. Now, I'm asking you, it's the second time I've asked you, why would I believe people who don't give tuppence for Muslims anywhere else in the world when they tell me something about Muslims in China? Why would I believe that, Simon?
Listen, I don't believe in the British media either. As I said, there's plenty of other sources with apart from the British and the Western media. As I said, China are guilty of torturing Uyghur Muslims.
Tell me them, Simon. Tell me them. What are your other sources?
You've seen the concentration camps on various media outlets. Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
So you are now.
Yes, you have. Again, you're denying it. You're trying to.
You are now relying on the media outlets.
Yes, but not Western media outlets. I'm relying on fair media outlets.
Which ones?
Doesn't matter which ones.
It does matter which ones, because I'm asking you. You're live on my show, and I'm asking you, what are these media outlets that you are praying in aid? Which ones?
Again, it's a relevant question. The question here was, why is it that you seem to defend socialist countries whenever they're committing atrocities, and yet whenever other countries carry out the same atrocities, like America and Britain have,
you've made that point.
You don't seem to care. You only seem to push your socialist agenda.
You've made that point. So now deal with this one. What is the evidence that you are relying on? You are refusing. You have thrice. Hold on. You have thrice refused to say which media outlets you are relying on for this information. I give you a fourth opportunity.
You yourself said that the Chinese were putting the Uyghur Muslims through camps, re-education camps, as I said.
De-radicalization.
Re-education camps, pretty much. You yourself said that on this show just a couple of minutes ago when the previous caller was on.
First of all, it's not the Uyghur Muslims. It is a section of the Uyghur Muslims. There are many other Muslims in China. There are more Muslims in China than the entire population of the EU. There are more mosques for Uyghurs in one province than there are in the entire United States. So we're not talking about the Uyghur Muslims, we're talking about a section of them. The fanaticized, extremized, Al-Qaeda-ized section. How would you deal with the Al-Qaeda elements in the East Turkestan Islamic movement? Or do you support them, Simon?
No, again, you're kind of blending the issue here. As I said, there's no proof that Al-Qaeda is in China, for starters.
Well, what's the proof that...
And the other thing you yourself said, hold on, let me finish.
We just showed you video.
Earlier on,
we just showed you the video.
You yourself earlier on said and claimed that the Chinese were putting Uyghur Muslims included in education centers.
I did not, actually. That was Vijay Prashad. I called them de-radicalization programs. I'm in favor of de-radicalization. Are you not?
Not in the sense, depends on what it is. As I said, not in the sense that you kind of seem to think of it, think it is. And I certainly wouldn't be interested if it was a socialist country doing it, because it turns into something you see out of George Orwell. So no, I'm not actually.
So we've established that I'm a socialist and you're not. So I don't quite know what the relevance of that is. I'm asking you,
the relevance of it is you'll never criticize a fellow socialist country who's committing out basically the crimes crimes against humanity.
But you keep saying that, but you haven't given me any evidence.
I've given you proof. Your argument is
you
the proof.
haven't even told me. You haven't even told me, because you don't have the guts to tell me who you're relying on for this information. I'll tell you who. Shall I?
Tell me, go on.
Al Jazeera.
Nope.
Where? Well then, tell me.
I'm not gonna play.
Why are you not? Why will you not say where you saw these?
Because people can find this information out themselves. People can find this information out themselves.
Simon, don't be a gutless coward.
I don't need to justify myself.
Don't be a gutless coward. Tell us where you got this information.
Again, coming back to it, as a socialist country, you back
Simon,
China. As I said, you'll never ever say anything against China.
No, actually, that's not true. I have many criticisms of China, not about its socialism, but about its capitalism. I have many criticisms of China. But I hate Islamist fanaticism of the kind that cuts people's heads off and eats their hearts all over the world. I'm not actually altogether sure that everyone that is in this conversation is with me on that. But what I will say finally, if you don't have the guts to tell us where you got the information that China is committing crimes against humanity, I'm going to say that for me, you're not to be relied upon. Now, Brian is in Fife. He says he invented Facebook. This could be lively. Go ahead, Brian.
Good evening, George. I hope you're doing well. I'm a fellow Scot, so I'm sure you will agree that Scots invent the television and the telephone and discovered penicillin, so we invent...
We did, and the steam engine.
And Tim Berners-Lee is the person that invented the World Wide Web at a science laboratory in Switzerland, CERN.
And is he Scottish?
No, he's English.
Okay.
But the sister laboratory is where I worked in Oxford, called the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory. We had the first web server in the United Kingdom. As you can imagine, we were linked. We got it early.
What year would that be?
1992.
Wow.
So for 5 years, I was researching various bits of the web, how to use it, what it could be doing, how we inform business so that they could take that technology and do what you're doing now, that you're sitting in a London studio, you're broadcasting to the world, you're on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, all of these platforms, you're broadcasting using the technology. And I developed a Facebook website in 1998. Wow. Now, the student Mark Zuckerberg did it 6 years later.
Wow.
And not only did he come up with a better system than mine, he went for students. I went for adults who did not trust the web and wouldn't put their information on. So I have tweeted for you.
We could have had a Mac Facebook, and you could have been speaking to me now as a billionaire.
Yes, but unfortunately I'm autistic, and I struggle to communicate with humans, as you can imagine.
You're communicating fine on this.
Me. Thank you. You're very polite.
No, you're communicating fine. But let me just ask you, Brian, now that we're 20 years into it all, is it, I mean, how overwhelmingly positive is it? I think it's an axiom that it's overwhelmingly a positive thing, the internet. But how much? On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, is it 8 out of 10 or 9 or only 6?
I would say 6. The biggest problem is people do not understand that a tweet or a Facebook post is publication.
Yeah, and forever. And forever.
Yes, journalists are very careful. They double source their information, and they are very careful. They might. Well,
some of them do, Brian. Some of them.
Indeed, but they've been trained and they know that they've got to get legal coverage. They've got an editor, and if they're in a court, there are restrictions. Tommy Robertson got caught in that he went into court, listened to it, came out and tweeted, and you were not allowed to publish the information that was in the court. And of course, he got done for that. Just to let you know, I downloaded 3 billion tweets.
3 billion?
Yes. As you can imagine, if
why did you do that?
To help the police.
Wow.
I built the police social media system. It actually protected you when you were an MP.
Really?
If you ever knew that there were social media threats, all MPs were being scanned on Twitter in case you were threatened. Wow. If the Queen went anywhere, if any politician, senior politician went anywhere, I designed and built the counter-terrorism and public health system that scanned Twitter for people making threats so that we could protect you. So you as an MP were protected, and if there was a credible threat against you, the police would have informed you that, George, there's a problem and somebody's made a threat against you in this area on Twitter. They would actually publish it.
Wow. That is amazing. So what are you doing now, Brian?
I'm between jobs at the moment, but I have invented a COVID solution, and my MP is, I don't know if, are you aware of politics at the moment? He was the vaccine spokesman for the SNP.
Was this your wristband issue that you called us about?
It is indeed. I am able to track that through CCTV, and as you're aware at the moment, you've been vaccinated, which is lovely and well done.
Thanks.
But we can't see you. You and 15 million people have disappeared in that out of 60 million people, there's 15 million. We can't see you. You currently could give the vaccine to somebody, not the vaccine, you could give COVID to somebody else. While you're protected, which is lovely, you're risky. You could pass it on. It's not a vaccine that protects you and stops you ever passing it on.
No, that's right. It just protects me from becoming seriously ill or dying.
Yes. Now, here's the rub. If you're an NHS person, when you got vaccinated, they give you a pink sticker that you stick on your blue NHS badge. So they are using colour so that they can tell who. And if you're in ICU at a hospital and you've got COVID, they give you a red wristband. Colour is being used, you see, and therefore CCTV can see these colours on the wristbands, and you as a human could see if the person next to you doesn't have a wristband, then be careful. For you could spread it to him, he could spread it to you. But if he was wearing a wristband...
I think we can solve that by just being careful anyway with everybody, Brian, but it's been fascinating talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for that call. Will Trump begin preparations for a 2024 presidential run? Yes, 51%. No, 12%. Ivanka instead down to 37%. Still a very, very healthy score. More than 3,000 people voted in that poll. And I wonder if they were in Florida. Can we find that out? It would be interesting so to do. Let's get the news first, though, with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
At least 15 million people in the UK have had their first coronavirus jab, Vaccine Minister Nazim Zahawi has said. The milestone was reached just over 2 months after the first jab was delivered in Britain on December the 8th. It comes after ministers said the UK was on track to meet its pledge of offering a vaccine to everyone in the top 4 priority groups by Monday. From Monday, the vaccine rollout is being expanded to include over 65s and those deemed clinically vulnerable. One dose of a COVID-19 vaccine gives 67% protection after 3 weeks, a leading epidemiologist has said. Professor Tim Spector of King's College London, who runs the Zoe COVID-19 surveillance app, said data collected from 50,000 users vaccinated with either the Pfizer or Oxford AstraZeneca jabs showed that one dose gave 46% protection after 2 weeks, rising to 67% after 3 to 6 weeks. The app uses information submitted by more than 4 million users across the world to predict and track coronavirus infections across the UK and other countries. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has ordered the country's biggest city, Auckland, to go into lockdown after the discovery of 3 new local coronavirus cases. The measure will last 3 days and require residents to stay at home. Ardern said the country was going hard and early after the cases were identified. New Zealand has won widespread praise for its handling of the pandemic, going months without community transmission. The country, with a population of 5 million, has recorded just over 2,300 cases of COVID and just 25 deaths. The measure in Auckland requires its 1.7 million residents to stay at home except for essential shopping and work. Schools and non-essential shops will close and entry in and out of the city is restricted. A woman who made sexual assault allegations against Scotland's former First Minister Alex Salmond has claimed that the Holyrood inquiry into the saga has been more traumatic for her in many ways than the trial was. The woman was one of 9 who gave evidence against the former First Minister at the High Court last year. Salmond was cleared of all 13 of the sexual assault charges against him. A committee is now investigating the Scottish Government's handling of the original complaints against Mr Salmond. The inquiry was intended to ensure that similar mistakes were not made in the future and that women could feel confident in coming forward with complaints about alleged sexual misconduct. But the woman told the BBC that she believed it had descended into a political fight that made it less likely that other women would report any concerns. She said the row had effectively allowed the government to get away with not being properly scrutinised on its procedures. A 22-year-old Indian climate activist has been arrested after sharing a document intended to help farmers protest against new agricultural laws. Disha Ravi is accused of sedition and criminal conspiracy. The document she shared, a toolkit which suggests ways of helping the farmers, was first posted by the prominent campaigner Greta Thunberg. Ravi, a student and one of the founders of the Indian branch of the Fridays for Future climate strike, was arrested by Delhi police. The protests, now in their 3rd month, mark the biggest challenge India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has faced. New laws loosen rules around the sale, pricing and storage of farm produce, which have protected India's farmers from the free market for decades. Farmers fear that the new laws will threaten decades-old concessions, such as assured prices, and weaken their bargaining power, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation by private companies. The Modi government has offered to suspend the laws, but the farmers want them replaced altogether. US President Joe Biden has said his predecessor Donald Trump's acquittal for inciting mob violence is a reminder that democracy is fragile. 7 Republicans joined the Democrats in voting to convict, falling short of the 2/3 majority needed to do so. Biden said the charge relating to Trump's role in the Capitol riot last month was not in dispute while seeking to move on from the process. Trump has welcomed his acquittal, calling his impeachment a witch hunt. In the Senate on Saturday, the trial ended with a 57-43 vote in favour of conviction. United Arab Emirates Hope mission has returned its first picture of Mars. The spacecraft entered into an orbit around the red planet on Tuesday, making the UAE the first Arab nation in history to have a scientific presence at Earth's near neighbour. The first image will be followed by many similar views of Mars. Hope was put into a wide orbit so it could study the planet's weather and climate systems, which mean that it will also see the planet's full disk. And finally, if it actually happens, it will probably be known as Boris's Borough. After Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister proposed a link between Scotland and Northern Ireland. His idea was for a bridge, but now it seems a 25-mile undersea tunnel is the way forward, according to the Secretary of State for Scotland. Alistair Jack reiterated his support for the link ahead of the expected release of a study that could kick off a formal consultation on the idea. He said that he had talked to the Prime Minister and that a tunnel appeared to be the most viable way forward. Johnson first backed the idea of connecting Larne in Northern Ireland to Stranraer in Scotland when he was Foreign Secretary in 2018. But this appears to have fallen out of favour as too complex and expensive, with a tunnel now seen as the preferred options. It would be about 25 miles long, not far off the Channel Tunnel's 31 miles, and provide a road and rail link. A report on UK transport infrastructure by the head of Network Rail, Sir Peter Hendy, is reportedly imminent and expected to say that the project is possible. That could kick off a formal government feasibility study. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Now, I've spoken to you before about this hate crimes bill that the SNP government are putting through, which explicitly states that even conversations in your own home can lead to you being prosecuted for hate speech. So Nicholas Baker on Twitter, brilliant. I said to my wife, I hate the SNP. She said to me, I hate the SNP too. Being law-abiding, we felt compelled to report each other to the police, as this could be a hate crime. Police, you're nicked. We both gulped and we're being sent down tomorrow. You think I'm making that up? Okay, so over 3,000 people voted in that poll. It's now closed, but it was such a good poll, I can't bear to think of another one, because I want to move swiftly on to the coronavirus issue, the issue of vaccination, the issue of reopening. For example, for youngest children in Scotland, my own, are due to go back to school on the 22nd of this month. In England, next month, with talk of al fresco dining in April. All sounds wonderfully tantalizing. Maybe my morale is just up because I've been vaccinated. Let's hear what the expert thinks. Dr. Ranjeet Brar, NHS consultant, physician and surgeon. Dr. Ranjeet, thanks. Tell us how you're feeling about the picture in Britain, first of all, this week. There's some grounds for optimism, is there not?
George, good to be with you. Thank you again. Gung Hei Fat Choi. Happy Valentine's for everyone who's out there. I think for the first time there is some cause for optimism, because I think the single intervention that we have got right, once we've had access to the vaccination, has been the vaccination campaign. It's not over, of course, George. I mean, if you look around the world, there's 109 million cases now, 2.4 million deaths. And in the UK this week, numbers are way down, and it's falling far faster than they would have done had there not been the enormous success, really, of the vaccination program. As we know, 15 million people now have been vaccinated with at least one shot. Among the 500,000 who had 2 doses of the vaccine, but those second doses will be coming, and we're increasingly aware that even one dose has had a protective effect, particularly after a long period of time, increasing over time, and therefore it's important after your first dose to shelter for at least 3, probably 4 or 5 weeks. But after that, really, even those most vulnerable people are increasingly confident coming to see me in hospital, increasingly confident coming to see me in clinic, coming for investigations, coming for their operations. And well, we're not by any means back to normal yet, because still there are 25,000 patients with coronavirus in the UK's hospitals, and that means fully a quarter of our acute beds are still occupied. Cases are way down, 97,000 this week, as opposed to just less than a month ago we were talking about close to 500,000 cases in a week. 500,000, George, more than 460,000 cases in a single week. But the death statistic is still very high, and you can hardly call it an endorsement of our government policy. The fact that even now, after this vaccination campaign has been going for 2 months, that we have had this week close to 4,845 deaths, people who have died due to coronavirus. So, the good news that we found an intervention that will make a lasting difference, allow us to move through this, open up, return to normality. But when we look back on this, I mean, the government have been promising an inquiry. Again, it'll be really too little, too late. But really, the government have absolutely, in the first instance, they've been true to their initial word, which was the strategy of herd immunity, protecting the economy as far as they were able to. They weren't able to because there was a crisis, a global financial crisis, which meant that the economy, we know, for the whole year shrank by more than 10, for certain quarters was down 20 and 30%, and worldwide there's going to be a massive impact on the health and well-being, which is not due to lockdown, not due to the government's response, far from it. We know that the countries that locked down effectively, meaning they targeted the virus and isolated appropriately from the beginning, did very well and will do relatively well economically, whereas we have done very poorly economically, exacerbated by our initial poor application of non-pharmaceutical measures. But yes, let's stay with the positive. Let's stay with the Valentine's Day theme. We do have some real hope looking forward that we can move through this now, George.
Well, we're definitely looking at it in a Valentine perspective. It's still not safe to kiss a stranger, but you can definitely now kiss your own wife with a relative confidence that you're not going to kill her. I feel a bit like the 2 guys in The Producers who fully expect, indeed make, their musical, deliberately to lose money, only to discover that it is a rip-roaring success, and they ask each other outside the theatre, where did it all go right? Where did this all go right? How come a government which has so catastrophically failed at every single stage of this disastrous year suddenly get it right on vaccination? Is that down to the NHS? Is it down to the army? Is it down to both?
Well, you can't give full credit to the government for the technology of vaccination. It's a more than 200-year-old technology, but we've had it's been a global problem, which has therefore engaged the entire health and scientific community in trying to find a solution. So there have been huge numbers of people looking for therapeutics, looking for vaccinations, and there have been a marked success in many different vaccination programs, many different vaccines available. We talked last week about the Sputnik vaccine, but also the AstraZeneca, also Moderna, also Pfizer. of course, the Chinese Sinovac vaccine in particular. So there have been many successful vaccines developed. I think the cheapest of those, the easiest distributed of those, will have a massive impact worldwide and will be given particularly by China and to an extent by Oxford AstraZeneca at a low price to even the poorest countries in the world, which will help them move past this pandemic. What the government has done is used this emergency to push its agenda, which is very similar to the TTIP agenda, very similar to the Trans-Pacific Partnership agenda. It's this concept of making companies more powerful, if you like, than national governments, of transferring huge amounts of money from state sector into the private hands, of opening up and deregulating markets for large capital, and they have applied that very successfully by their own yardstick during this pandemic. That without scrutiny, they have been making sure they had maximum leverage, maximum power to give out huge amounts of money in contracts. Many of those have been totally unsuccessful. The testing campaign was very poorly run. The number of companies who had never had any experience of PPI, who were given hundreds of millions because they were connected to the Tory party, without scrutiny, without any comeback, without any apparent measures that we're able to take against our government or apply scrutiny. All of these were, a devastating failure. But in this one area where huge contracts were able to be given to pharmaceutical companies who in the event did come up with successful vaccines, that has proved the success. But I think it's worth reflecting on the opaque nature of the COVID legislation, the way in which they have managed to, our government that is, have managed to avoid scrutiny, avoid even the most basics of what would have been considered financial propriety for a public body. In terms of contracting, even within a capitalist system, which is by its nature rigged in favour of the big players, rigged in favour of the monopolists. And this is something that we have seen this week. Matt Hancock has announced and made great fanfare that he thinks now, at the height of a pandemic, or as we're moving out of a pandemic, is the best time to announce a major structural reorganisation of the health service, George.
Oh, my goodness. Now, even the Telegraph this week has conceded that the Sputnik 5 has been an enormous success for Russia and is an extraordinarily efficacious and simple vaccination. The five Chinese vaccines are doing rip-roaring trade at cost price, as you said, in poor countries that wouldn't be able to buy from Big Pharma. Big Pharma and big companies are usually effective. The problem is the government have been giving contracts to people, in some cases, like the ferry companies that were given a ferry contract even though they had no ferries. Some people got big business from the British government that had never, ever done any of the tasks that they were now being richly rewarded for doing, and in some cases, then, perhaps unsurprisingly, failed to carry out. This is not the stuff for an inquiry, Doctor. This is the stuff for a trial, surely.
It is, George, but I think what we're going to actually see is in fact more of the same, because the Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock both have talked about reversing some of the 2012 Health and Social Care Act. That was the act, if you recall, that essentially actually removed day-to-day operational control of government ministers and transferred, in fact, actual control of the NHS to Sir Simon Stevens, who was previously an employee, a very senior employee of the global arm of United Health, the largest healthcare company on earth, and the man who helped Tony Blair to introduce PFI on a massive scale into the NHS. Now, at the beginning of this pandemic, I don't know if you remember, Boris Johnson, in fact, made some quite interesting remarks, which was that he was surprised to find out how little control he and central government had over the NHS. Clearly, despite being the Prime Minister, he hadn't really been following what his colleagues were up to in the health sector, or he hadn't understood it. But this pandemic has brought it back to him. Now, what as we're being told in the press is that will be reversed. But if you read the fine print, what you see is not that tendering will stop, not that the internal market will disappear. Rather, they will get rid of what they said were measures necessary to make the internal market fair. So competition regulators, the necessity to put contracts at general tender to give different companies the ability to bid for them. Rather, we'll see a much more similar process going on throughout the NHS, where contracts are simply made in an opaque fashion because the health boards in charge of them deem that to be appropriate. And we've seen a lot of takeovers during this pandemic of groups of GPs, groups of clinicians by, if you like, the CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups, who are now the bodies of GPs who control 80% of the 140 billion annual budget of the NHS. These groups are merging with the health insurance industry, Centene and United Health in particular. And what we'll see increasingly is that they are getting the ability to impose their governance structures, their decision-making on what procedures you will and won't be able to have on the NHS, which procedures, therefore, you will and won't need supplementary insurance for. And so, in fact, what we're seeing under the slogan of protect the NHS is quite the opposite. And what we're seeing under the words coming from our health minister and our prime minister, that we're reversing the unpopular decisions of the 2012 Health and Social Care Act. What we're instead doing is, in fact, strengthening them, reinforcing them, but giving them the same opportunity to simply hand out massive contract after massive contract and overall operational care, ultimately to the health insurance industry, George. And so we are witnessing a massive acceleration of our privatisation of our health. Is very worrying indeed.
Yeah, we'll have to return to that in more depth as a subject on its own, I think. But here's a couple of calls, Doc, that want to talk with you. Justin in Minnesota. Go ahead, Justin.
How are you, Doctor?
I'm very well, thanks, Justin.
Good. My question for you, and I know you're a doctor and all that, but what are your views on the World Health Organization? I see them pushing their videos online on YouTube all the time, and I personally don't really believe these are doctors. I think these are actors, and I'm trying to honestly convince a lot of people not to get the COVID vaccine because I believe the second jab is going to lead to a lot of bad things come summertime. What do you think?
Thanks, Justin. Of course, that's not the view of the mother of all talk shows. I want to make quickly clear. Please, Doctor, the first part particularly on the World Health Organization. Justin thinks they're actors.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know where you got that idea, Justin. It's not the case. So there's lots of different arms to the World Health Organization. They are the groups of medical associations and nations who come together to try and form world health policy and to identify and address real world health issues. So they've been around for a very, very long time. They're as old as the United Nations, essentially. But they certainly are a genuine organization. Their leader, actually, Dr. Theodore Ghebreyesus, was promoted and put forward for that position by your own government in the United States. But he's actually done a surprisingly good job during this pandemic. And certainly, if you look at the initial reports of the World Health Organization, medics from every country went to China, to the Wuhan area when that COVID-2019 was first developed. And it's a report I would recommend you read. I'd recommend everyone read. It makes it absolutely clear just how well China dealt with it. It also led to a model that the World Health Organization put forward, encouraging other nations to be able to deal with their pandemic appropriately. The thing that's really hampered the United States in particular was the patchy nature of the healthcare response, the inequality in the country, and the very poor leadership during that pandemic that made them totally unable to respond to the prescriptions and the plans of the World Health Organization, despite the fact that it's the wealthiest nation on earth. And of course, the education and the information that was disseminated was so confusing, so misleading, partly because your leadership, unfortunately, were much more interested in scoring anti-China points than actually looking after the health of their own population. So just you're totally wrong, I'm afraid. But you should definitely coronavirus has to be taken seriously. But I think the vaccination is a good thing that will allow us to move through this and return to something like normal life. When we can get back to normal politics, normal issues, there will still be a great deal of inequality, great deal to do, great deal of challenge for our two countries and the world going forward. But can't agree with you on the nature of the World Health Organization.
Let's hear from Eve in Idaho. Go ahead, Eve.
Hello. Thank you very much for this great show. My information about the first shot of the Pfizer vaccine is that it is a success, and George also testified that it was a success for him. But my information is not as positive for the second shot of the Pfizer vaccine. In fact, I heard that even Pfizer is considering maybe either spacing it more out or maybe make it not as strong. And that's my question. What do you think about the second shot of the Pfizer vaccine?
Okay, good question. I would have asked him off stage myself for that very question. Go ahead, Doctor.
Thanks. So, I mean, my appraisal of the Pfizer vaccine is only based on the information that is currently available. And as we know, the Pfizer vaccine was launched on the basis of their own internal trial, which wasn't fully published, but rather on the first interim analysis. But all the data we had suggested on low numbers in both wings of the arm who actually contracted, both wings of the trial who actually contracted COVID during the trial, and that trial was some 33,000 people, if memory serves. However, we suggested there was an efficacy of 95% with the 2-dose regimen, and that was following 2 doses taken 3 weeks apart. Pfizer have been very strongly saying that they don't recommend a delay with their vaccine between 1 shot and 2, and it does seem that some trials have shown that there's probably a 50% efficacy after a single shot. But I haven't seen the data suggest that the second shot delayed wouldn't be effective. That would be counterintuitive. One would expect there to be a suitable boost and ultimately to reach a similar degree of efficacy after the second shot. But what we don't have, or what I haven't seen, are the data relating to the entire population. There have been anecdotally, and in my own experience and others, several people who I know have contracted the coronavirus after a single dose, particularly soon after a single dose, and it does seem that the efficacy increases over time. So waiting a month or a month and a half after your first dose before you consider yourself to be in any way protected is likely to be sensible. I would expect after the second dose for you to reach those high degrees of efficacy if indeed the trial in general is reproducible in the larger community. And I think we probably do need more information to demonstrate that's the case. But certainly the initial information we have, certainly for the AstraZeneca, is that vaccination does indeed stop the spread of the virus as well as giving individual protection.
Thanks for that, Eve, and to Justin also, Minnesota and Idaho. Doctor, I'm being flooded with look, nothing is as it appears to be, at least to a section of the community. And I am now being flooded with allegations that this whole thing is fake, that you're probably sitting with a green screen behind you rather than sitting in your study. And the reason is the clock that is behind you. You thought that people were looking at you, but they were looking at your clock. Can I suggest a couple of AAA batteries would bring that clock up to speed? So that
I did buy some batteries today, George. I'm sorry, I can fit them. If you want, I can show you my. There you go. There's the date and time.
There
today.
you go.
That's probably backwards.
Well,
you know,
there are people think the moon landings were faked. People think
you want to see that again? Did you see that?
Our discussion is
21,
faked.
21, 29.
There you go.
14.
That
if you
should
can see
do
that,
it,
but that's
but
what
you
my
never know.
watch says.
That should convince them, but you never know. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ranjeet Brar, for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. A 2-minute break, count them.
Look at these reviews. An intermediate masterpiece. No way out. A surprise smash. No way out. It was shocking, courageous, inclusive, and I loved every minute of it. No way out. How could this happen? The show was lousy and long, and we did everything wrong. Where did we go right?
Christmas came early to broadcasting this year, and guess who they stuffed in our stocking? George Galloway.
It was so crass and so crude, even Murdoch would have booed. Where did we go right?
Last year, a radio star was reborn on the airwaves, the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. A new show, Moats Extra George Galloway Bare Knuckle. We predict the new show's name will soon be up in lights, if they can find enough bulbs. We searched Britain on and off for a lady with a cough. We had callers and reporters by the score. We were so enthusiastic to build a set made out of plastic. If anyone spoke sense, well, we sent them out the door.
They shouted, hooray, that's socialist on display. Where did we go right?
When they asked for one more day, we nearly ran away. Where did we go right?
A show so easy to despise.
Now it's up for the Pulitzer Prize. Oh, where, tell us where did we go right?
The best new program of the decade. George Galloway is a political genius. Now they like him. Oh, we knew it wouldn't sell.
We broadcast in Israel. It's the end of our career.
It'll run for 20 years. Tell us where did we go right?
George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Join us at the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees.
Just fantastic. Simon, that's brilliant work. Where did it all go right? Now, on the US issue, the Trump issue, Tom says Ivanka is the next member of the Trump clan who will run for office as soon as possible. Wow. Nadia says both parties are taking their country into very hard times. And Martin says if Trump runs again, he will win. And with 2 impeachment trials, he has no flies on him. Trump is not a problem. The problem is the entrenched elite has no influence over Trump because he needed no favor or money from the elite. And Terry says, hope he doesn't. I'd like to see someone independent who doesn't present themselves because extreme wealth got them there, or a doddery old fool who spent 50 years on Capitol Hill. Well, who could you mean by that? And Mike says, like him or loathe him, Trump was the outsider who took on the establishment. And in their clumsy actions, the Democrats have made him stronger than before. So yes, he will stand again. Let's hear from Luke in Liverpool about Labour. Go ahead, Luke.
It's right, George. Good to speak to you first time. Just to say thanks for all you've been doing the last few months and few years. You know, been a big fan of yourself.
Can we call him back? Because I can't hear any of that. Luke, hang up and we'll call you back. Let's go to Stuart in Hastings on chest feeding. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hello, George. How are you? Thank you for having me on your show.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I totally agree with what you're saying previously, earlier on in the show about the whole thing is madness, which it is madness.
Transmania.
Yeah, absolutely, it's madness. I mean, you know, over the years in my life, you know, I've seen campaigns over the years like fighting for individual rights and all that. I mean, which is
especially women. Women fought for 100 years for the less than perfect place that they have achieved in our society, and now we've got people trying to cancel them, to negate them, to take away their freedoms that they've won.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, it's trying to change the whole thing for their own ends. I think it's a dangerous precedent. I don't
understand it though, Stuart. What are their own ends? I mean, I've known trans people, perfectly lovely people, who want no trouble. All they want is to be treated as they want to, as they feel they should be treated, and I have done that. None of this argument should be confused with meanness or wickedness towards trans people. It isn't. I actually have the feeling that the lobby, who are mainly not trans people, are actually the ones responsible for this. Yeah, go on, Stuart.
Yeah. I have been arguing that for quite some time, that the people who are pushing this agenda are not truly transgender people. And you confirm that, you know what I mean, which is true.
That's my feeling, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a wider agenda here, which is a dangerous agenda.
Yeah, what do you think it is? I'll tell you, I'm very troubled, and I'm going to ask Dr. Ranjeet in coming weeks about this. I'm very, very troubled about children being given hormone blockers to distort their development. I don't see how that fits with the Hippocratic Oath, because a child is not capable of consenting to that. So it must be their parents who are consenting to it. And I don't see how the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm can possibly square with that. What do you think, Stuart?
I agree with you. I think it's right. It doesn't square with that at all. It's crazy, and I do believe that there's a wider agenda here, like with this. I mean, what the agenda is, we need to find out, and I'm sure a man of your abilities will find that out in the long term.
I'll try. Thanks, Stuart, for that compliment and that call. Thank you. Let's hear from Luke in Liverpool. Hope it's a better line. Go ahead, Luke.
Hello, George. Can you hear me, mate?
Yeah, very good, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, what I'm talking about really is this Keir Starmer. He's supposed to be like a man of the people, but he's he's a QC. He's a lord. But I'm a Jeremy Corbyn fan. My dad's a big fan of yourself as well. Socialist, trade unionist. He's a man of the people. Apparently, he's the one who's going to take Labour forward.
I don't know why you think he's a man of the people. I would have thought...
but that's not my opinion. That's what the media are saying. You know what I mean? That's not my opinion, but that's what you're told to believe, isn't it, George?
I think very few people believe it. They said that Corbyn was holding Labour back, but in fact, it turns out Corbyn was holding Labour up because since he left, they have lost by one means or another a huge number of their members. And their polling has gone down, not up, but down, despite over 100,000 dead people.
The thing about this Keir is as well, I've seen, I'll always back, I think myself a loyal Labour man. So is my dad, so is my family, that's what we believe in. And I've seen, we've been through Blair, or what have you been through, all the Labour. But I've seen this pair of jeans that Keir Starmer's been wearing, proper baggy pair of jeans.
Let's go to Mike. Let's go to Mike in South Carolina. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, George. It's great to talk to you again. Never miss your show.
Thanks. Thanks very much, sir.
I wanted to address the conversation you had with Simon earlier, that he seems to think that your only reason for being there is to promote a socialist agenda. And, he says that you won't support any, like, for instance, the China argument that he was making. And you and I both know that China...
He wouldn't give the source of his claim that China was committing crimes against humanity. And we know the reason why, Mike. Because the only people that are claiming that are either television stations and media outlets that support the fanatic Islamist cause, or the Western media outlets who've never given a damn about Muslims anywhere else in the world, but are suddenly in love with the Muslims of China.
Absolutely true, and you know you can see that he has swallowed the talking points about this, and socialism in and of itself is evident in every country. It's here in the United States, it's in the UK, it's all over Europe. It's just a matter of degree, a few degrees of separation between Western countries and China, who is now almost fully capitalist. But the problem is. The Chinese are doing capitalism much better than the United States and even the rest of the countries
that's what they really don't like, isn't it? It's not the socialism in China that they don't like. It's that the capitalism in China is being done far more successfully.
Oh, absolutely, and nothing illustrates that point better than the row that the Western governments are having with Huawei. Okay, when they actually arrested the daughter of the CEO of Huawei in Canada at the request of the American government. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that that Huawei is a much better company than the ones that it's already surpassed. It's number one, past Apple and Samsung and the rest of them in telecommunications equipment. And the fact of the matter is, Huawei, the company, is wholly owned by the employees. The CEO of Huawei only has a 1% share of Huawei. The rest of it is owned by the employees, and we can't have that.
I'm glad you made that point. I had forgotten it. And you're absolutely correct. We have such places here, not many, but one of the finest stores in the country is the John Lewis Partnership, which is jointly owned by all the employees. They have a grocery arm also, which is owned by the employees. This kind of thing mustn't be allowed to catch on, Mike.
That's exactly right, because that would take all that money away from these people that are running everything.
Well done, great call. Thanks for it. Ian is in Hounslow on China. Go ahead, Ian.
Hello, George.
Hi.
It's just about this Western propaganda blitz against the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
I mean, no nation is completely innocent. No nation is completely blemish-free. But the way they're going on, anyone would think we hadn't laid waste to all those countries in the Middle East surrounding Israel.
In the name of crushing militant Islam.
Well, the worst one, of course, is Yemen, who've done nothing to nobody.
Exactly.
That is a real crime. And we've got shock jock DJs on right-wing neoliberal stations pouring out this propaganda. And when I try to call, they're call screening. They won't even let you put a question to them.
View.
A contrary view at all.
What you've said there is absolutely blindingly true. That we have fought war after war after war against what we say we're fighting, extremist Muslims, extremist Muslim leaders. China puts extremist Muslims in a de-radicalization center or camp, call it what you will, and suddenly all the people that supported all the wars against the Muslim countries around the world are throwing their hands up in horror about what's happening in China. And useful idiots like Simon, if that's his name, who called up earlier, like Pavlov's dogs, go running after them. Ian.
These camps, are they called Abu Ghraib and Camp Delta? Is that what they're called?
Or Guantanamo Bay.
Exactly. Now look at Hong Kong. Look at the restraint the Chinese police held against what were rioters.
Not armed, by the way.
In America,
the Chinese police are not even armed.
In America, they shot people. I didn't see them shooting anybody in Hong Kong. Did you?
No. But I saw demonstrators setting fire to people who were supporting the police. I did see that. Ian, thanks for the call. The hour is late, must press on. Dale is in Surrey on China. Go ahead, Dale.
Oh, hi, George. Nice to be on the show again.
And you, sir.
I just wanted to ask about your opinion. I'm surprised you didn't mention it because I follow your Twitter feed quite a lot, but about the China banning BBC World Service. I mean,
I did mention it on Twitter. I predicted it, yeah.
I mean, it's just astounding the hypocrisy, though, because CGTN was banned literally a couple of days before.
Exactly.
And
it's
now,
a tit for tat, yeah.
And now they're saying that China's curtailing media freedom. I mean, that's the pot calling the kettle black, surely.
Well, it shows you the capacity these people have for lying. They are attacking China for closing the BBC in China when they just closed the Chinese main broadcasting entity, CGTN, a week earlier. But they hope that you don't know that or that you don't connect these two things. I mean, the ease, Dale, the ease with which these people can lie, can dissemble, can distort and deceive is actually truly remarkable. There are BBC people with straight faces lamenting the closure of BBC World in China when they know it is a direct response to the British state regulator, Ofcom, closing down Chinese TV 1 week before.
It's like they have to find some way to criticize China or Russia. I don't know if you saw the latest news now. Apparently, Elon Musk wants to meet with Vladimir Putin.
I did see that. I advise President Putin to meet Elon Musk. He's a big player in business. I was surprised to see the invitation, but why shouldn't he accept it, Dale? I'm ready to talk to anyone, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, but what level of criticism do you think Elon Musk will now face?
Well, that is a good point. That is a very good point. I hadn't thought of that. Very good indeed, Dale. Thanks for that. Let's go to Graham in Ayrshire on Transmania. Go ahead, Graham.
Hi, George. I was indeed going to talk to you about Transmania. I was also hoping to talk about COVID-19. I'm kind of suspecting I might not have time for both. If
you're quick, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'll try my best. But I just wanted to thank you, first of all, for raising this, because it is an important issue, and it's one that a lot of people are scared to talk about, and that's really the reason I'm calling. First of all, just to reinforce that, more people should be talking about it, because it's not just the words that are being used that's important. These have real world implications as well. At the moment, we're seeing males in women's sports fighting in the Olympics and things like weightlifting. It's obscene. We're seeing Australian footballers, playing against women. We're seeing Fallon Fox in mixed martial arts, transitioning male to female, now fighting against women in the steel cage. All of these things are obscene. We're also seeing women not just having their identity erased, but that's making it difficult for them to fight for their rights as well, because women's rights, women's oppression isn't just based on their gender identity, it's based on their biology. And I think that's something we need to recognise if we want to tackle this, the issue of women's oppression as well.
That's just wonderful. We will return to that subject, Graham, I'm sure. Go ahead to your second point.
Please. Sorry, if I can just finish one little thing on the Transmania issue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to speak to people on the left here, because I'm a leftist myself, very far on the left, as a matter of fact. So I don't come from any sort of bigoted perspective. I believe people should have rights to work, to access all services, regardless of how they identify or who they want to sleep with. Anything, that's absolutely up to them. And I just wanted to appeal to those on the left who are confused by this issue, because many are seeing the conflation between homophobia and transphobia, and the last thing they want to do is be seen as a bigot. And so I thought maybe it would help to give people the confidence to speak out by just raising a couple of definitions, if that's all right.
Go on, yeah.
So, when we're talking about sex, what we're really talking about is a biological construct. And if we understand this definition, I think it makes the whole topic easier to understand. Now, everyone knows, or at least until 5 years ago, everyone knew what sex was. It's a descriptor of your reproductive capacity. So that's something that's binary. Males, the members of the species, whether it's humans, birds, cats, lions, whatever, they're the ones that produce spermatoza gamete. And that's the gamete that fertilizes with ova to create zygotes. In other words, you need these two different sexes to produce, to reproduce. So if you understand that, the question of trans women, that it's quite clear. A trans woman is a male; they're born male with the capacity to produce the spermatoa. They will never be able to produce ova, so they will always be male. And I think if you grasp that, it becomes easier to stand up and call the anti-science trans lobby.
I can't let you go on to the other issue, Graham, because of the hour. But you've made a very powerful point on that. Men are men, and women are women. Just by incanting, as an earlier texter did, that trans women are women, does not make them so. Any more than me defining myself, declaring myself as Sir Marcus Rashford makes me Sir Marcus Rashford. It's as binary as that. Graham in Ayrshire, thanks. Great call. I'll be a lot in Ayrshire over the next few weeks, Graham. Maybe we'll meet. Richard is in Manchester, and he may be the last call. No, we might get another one in. Richard, go ahead. Richard, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me, George?
Very clearly now, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
George, the first thing I want to ask about is this tape about the killing of Kelly, which is coming out in a little while. How long is it going to be, please?
It's a 90-minute feature. It will, though there will be different versions of it, because if we can persuade television station to air it, then 90 minutes will be too long for most of those, and we hope to negotiate television coverage of it to reach the maximum audience. So there'll be a director's cut, and there'll be the commercially available option. But the film will be out in April, Richard. It can be pre-ordered actually at my shop, georgegalloway.shop. And a lot of people have already pre-ordered it, and many have ordered the very nice, brilliant actually, cinema poster, which we sign and send off to people. So anticipation is building, Richard.
Great, George.
Kelly.
It's building up here in Manchester with all the people who are interested what went on at that stage. Can I just take up a little one, George? About last week, I got hold of the Scottish Herald, and I contributed to that for a couple of months to give me an insight, a closer insight, with it being from the Scots, into what was happening with the salmon affair with sturgeon.
Yeah.
And I got quite into it on the 11th. It was, and you know the section where it comes up comments and people actually asking different questions, and then somebody else would give an answer, and then it would go on and so on. Who came up on it but Alistair Campbell?
Oh, really?
So yes, and I got involved in this, and I sort of put on that. Why are you getting involved in this? What has it got to do with you? Because lots of people have been commenting about the nastiness of sturgeon and what is going on with her MPs and so on, and they've been casting aspersions as to who's been sort of advising her over the last 6 months. It's got worse and worse. Anyway, I just
well, that's very interesting. I wonder if it might be Alistair Campbell. That would certainly explain a thing or two. Richard, yes. From my point of view, and I declare an interest, I know Alex Salmond exceedingly well. I sat in Parliament with him for more than 20 years.
I watched you.
Yeah, I'm wholly against his campaign for separatism, but he is not as he was painted. He was always going to be acquitted, as I predicted in advance at the time. He was an innocent man who was set up by people in his own party. Imagine that.
I fully agree with that. And anybody who can stoop so low to try to get a man, what it would have been, I think, at the end of the day, would be a life sentence for him.
Yeah.
And anybody who could do that needs watching very, very carefully.
Well, I think you've put that brilliantly. Anybody that can do that wants watching very carefully. Richard, thanks for a wonderful call. Let's hear from Breed in Ireland. Go ahead, Breed.
Yeah, hi George. Happy Valentine's.
And to you, my dear.
Thank you very much. Are you doing a Trojan work to keep Britain together, George? And as you've just been saying, you're resisting Scottish independence hugely. And you're doing Trojan work about that. But also in the past, you know, you said that you sort of believe in Irish unification. I'm just wondering how you, if your excitement around the proposed tunnel between Stranraer and Larne has something to do with sympathy for Northern Irish loyalists and unionists these days, seeing as they're really hurting.
It has nothing to do with that. My views on Ireland are well known and lifelong. And if you think about it, are entirely in keeping with my views about Britain. I don't agree with partitioning small islands. I believe in unifying countries, not breaking them up. And so from my point of view, there's no contradiction in these two things at all. Either the people of Northern Ireland will vote to reunify or they will not. That's a matter for them. It's laid out in the Good Friday Agreement. They have the right to a border poll, and when that border poll is held, I don't know when it will be, it will either agree to reunification or it will agree to the status quo. Either way, having this tunnel is a very good idea. If the North voted for reunification, if it did, it would be of solace to the people in Northern Ireland who identify as British, that there was a physical connection to Britain. I'd go further and say that in those circumstances, those who wanted to keep their British nationality but continue to live in Ireland ought to be accommodated so that they could be binationals and so on. If, on the other hand, the people in the North decide they want to remain in Britain, then it goes without saying that they will be far more closely connected if this tunnel exists. But my main reason, Breed, is for jobs in the south of Scotland. I want to see a £10 billion public investment in construction, in engineering, in the roadworks, in the rail works. I want to see employment in my own area picked up off the ground and set to work. That's my main reason. And I believe it will be to the economic as well as the cultural and other tourist and so on benefit of both Ireland and Scotland. Last word to you.
Yeah, that's very logical there and understandable, George. Finally, do you think that the protocol is very difficult for unionists to swallow? And what advice would you have for the DUP at this point?
I never give advice to the DUP in public at 21:57 and 25 seconds. I don't have time, in other words, to do so. Call me again and we might get on to that, because we've got a legend on the line. It's Norma in Bristol. Norma, how wonderful. Go ahead.
Hello. There's never much time, George, so I'm cutting it short.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day. Now, my thrill of the day was next door. Suddenly, there was this loud music outside, Bob Marley, One Love, blaring out. So we went outside to see the spectacle. Now, her man proposed to my lovely neighbour next door.
Good.
And they've both been in their marriage before, and they were in their 40s. And she accepted, and we all sang this great big Bob Marley One Love song together.
How
and
totally wonderful. This happened today?
Today, because it's Valentine's Day. It was a lovely surprise, George. It really was.
That is fantastic. And what a great choice of song.
Oh, yeah.
One Love.
Great.
It's wonderful that still in 2021, under pressure from all kinds of things. New ideas and economic and health challenges.
Yeah.
Men are still going down on one knee and asking women to marry them. Don't you think that's great?
Oh, it was lovely, George. But my unromantic moment is my two teeth fell out. So I'm speaking funny because I've just got some false teeth. Now that is so unromantic at my age, but that's my Valentine's
I'm sure that your husband will kiss you just as sweetly as ever without your two front teeth. It's been marvellous for me. If it was for you, come back next week, same time, same place. Good night.